You've been taught that money is math, spreadsheets, formulas, compound interest tables. You've been told that if you're smart enough, if you study hard enough, you'll figure out the equation and win the game. That's a lie. Finance is not a hard science. It's a soft skill. It's behavior. It's ego, pride, fear, and envy all scrambled together at the dinner table, not the boardroom. Warren Buffett has made billions not because he's the smartest man in the room, but because he's been investing since he was 10 years old. He's been playing the game for 3/4 of a century. That's not intelligence. That's patience. That's behavior. This audiobook is not about what you know. It's about how you behave. Morgan Housel's timeless lessons on wealth, greed, and happiness reveal that your financial success depends less on your IQ and more on your emotional wiring. The person who learns to control their own psychology will outperform the genius who can't. For the next 3 hours, we will unlearn the myths and install the mindsets that actually build lasting wealth. Let's begin. Chapter 1. No one's crazy. Let me tell you about two people. Person A was born in 1970. They grew up watching their parents struggle through the stagflation of the 1970s, the high interest rates of the early 1980s. Their family lost a home. Money was a source of constant anxiety. They learned, cash is king. The stock market is a casino. Debt is a four-letter word. Person B was born in 1990. They grew up watching their parents' 401k triple during the 1990s bull market. They saw real estate double. They heard stories of friends who bought Apple at $5. They learned, stocks always go up. Real estate is free money. Debt is leverage, a tool to get rich. Now, person A is 54. Person B is 34. They're sitting at a dinner table, and the conversation turns to investing. Person B says, "You're crazy not to be 100% in stocks. You're leaving money on the table. My Roth IRA is up 400% since I started." Person A says, "You're crazy to trust the market. I've seen too many people wiped out. I keep my money in CDs and treasuries. I sleep at night." Who is right? Neither. Both. They are both making perfectly rational decisions based on the data they've collected over a lifetime. Their financial brains were programmed by different operating systems. They are playing different games with different rulebooks, staring at each other across the table, calling each other crazy. No one's crazy. They just have different memories. This is the most important lesson in the psychology of money. You cannot separate financial decisions from life experience. Every choice you make with your wallet is filtered through the unique, unrepeatable history of your own life. The economy you grew up in. The lessons your parents taught you, directly or silently. The luck you've had. The losses you've suffered. The wins that made you overconfident. You have a choice. You can continue to look at other people's financial choices and shake your head in judgment. Or you can pause and recognize that they are operating from a completely different set of data. That's the key. Let me give you a real-world example. Think about the generation that lived through the Great Depression. People who came of age in the 1930s watched their parents lose everything. Banks failed. Soup lines stretched for blocks. The stock market wasn't a wealth-building tool. It was a gambling den that ruined families. That generation didn't trust banks. They stuffed cash under mattresses. They bought gold coins and buried them. They were terrified of debt. To someone born in 1985, this looks insane. Why wouldn't you invest? Why wouldn't you use leverage? You're missing out on millions. But to the depression survivor, their behavior isn't crazy. It's survival. It's the only rational response to the world they experienced. You don't need their permission to understand their perspective. You just need to recognize that their reality is different from yours. Now flip it. The millennial who went all in on crypto in 2020? To someone who lived through the dot-com crash, that looks like reckless gambling. But to that 25-year-old, they've only ever seen assets go up. They've only heard stories of friends who made it overnight. They're not crazy. They're playing the game they learned. This doesn't mean all financial decisions are equally wise. It means judgment is a waste of energy. The goal is not to decide who's right. The goal is to understand your own wiring. Because your financial psychology was programmed before you could do calculus, before you understood compound interest, before you ever read a single investing book. Your parents' anxiety about money became your anxiety. The economic headlines of your childhood became your baseline for normal. The first time you lost money in the market shaped your risk tolerance forever. You are not a blank slate making rational calculations. You are a walking archive of financial memories, many of which you didn't even choose. So the first transformation is this: stop judging. Start understanding. When you see someone making a financial choice that baffles you, pause. Ask yourself, what must their life experience have been for this to make sense? Not so you can agree with them. So you can stop wasting energy on outrage and start focusing on your own psychology. The second transformation is deeper. You must turn that lens inward. Ask yourself the hard questions. What economic events shaped my childhood? A boom? A crash? Stagnation? What did my parents teach me about money, explicitly and implicitly? What financial wins have made me overconfident? What losses have made me overly cautious? You are strong. You are intelligent. You can examine your own programming without flinching. In fact, you must. Because until you understand the stories your brain is telling you about money, you will be a puppet to them. You'll think you're making rational decisions when you're actually just replaying old tapes. Let me give you a personal example. Many people who lived through the 2008 financial crisis have a deep, almost irrational fear of another housing crash. They avoid real estate entirely. They rent, even when buying would be cheaper. To someone who started investing in 2012, this looks paranoid. But to them, it's self-preservation. They're not crazy. They're scarred. The same applies to you. Whatever your financial quirks, hoarding cash, avoiding the market, taking excessive risks, refusing to spend on yourself, they didn't appear from nowhere. They were programmed. And programs can be examined, updated, rewritten. You are the master of your own financial operating system, not the victim of it. So here is your first action. Your first step toward mastering the psychology of money. 1. The memory audit. Tonight, sit down with a notebook. Write down the 3 most significant financial memories of your childhood and young adulthood. Not just events, stories. What did you observe? What did you feel? What did you conclude about money from those experiences? 2. The generosity filter. The next time you hear about someone's financial decision that makes you want to scream, "That's crazy," pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what life experience might have led them here? You don't have to agree. Just understand. Let the judgment go. 3. The wiring diagram. Begin to sketch your own financial profile. Are you a saver or a spender by nature? Risk-tolerant or risk-averse? Where did those tendencies come from? Write it down. You are mapping your own mind. This is the foundation. Not a single stock tip. Not a magic formula. Just the simple, profound recognition that money is not math. It's memory. It's emotion. It's psychology. And once you understand that, you can stop fighting yourself and start working with your own wiring. You can stop judging others and start learning from their differences. You can stop being a puppet to your past and start becoming the programmer of your financial future. No one's crazy. They just have different memories. Including you. Including me. Including every person who has ever made a financial decision that baffled you. Now, with that humility and awareness installed, we must confront the twin forces that shape every outcome. Forces we love to ignore when we succeed and love to blame when we fail. We must talk about the twins you can't escape. Moving to Chapter 2, Luck and Risk, the twins you can't ignore. And if you're ready to stop judging and start understanding your own financial wiring, hit subscribe. Consider it the first step in your memory audit. A small, intentional choice to program your feed with lessons that actually help you understand money, not just react to it. You're not crazy. You're just choosing better input. Our second chapter is about luck and risk, the twins you can't ignore. Let me tell you about Bill Gates. In 1968, Bill Gates was an 8th grader at Lakeside School, a private prep school in Seattle. That year, the school's Mothers Club held a rummage sale. They raised $3,000. And with that money, they did something almost unheard of at the time. They bought a computer terminal for the school. Not a computer, a terminal, connected via phone line to a mainframe somewhere else. But it was access. And in 1968, access to a computer was rarer than a private jet. Lakeside was one of the only high schools on the entire planet where a teenager could learn to program. Bill Gates got thousands of hours of programming experience before he graduated high school. By the time he was old enough to start Microsoft, he had already been coding for nearly a decade. He was, by any measure, extraordinarily talented and extraordinarily hardworking. But he was also extraordinarily lucky. If the Mothers Club had bought new curtains instead of a computer terminal, would Microsoft exist? Would Bill Gates be Bill Gates? We'll never know. Because luck is real. And it matters. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. This is the central truth of Chapter 2. Every outcome in your life, every success, every failure, every financial win, every devastating loss, is guided by forces beyond your individual effort. You are not the sole author of your story. Luck and risk are co-writers, and they don't ask for permission. Let's be clear. This is not an excuse for mediocrity. It's not a reason to stop trying. It's a call to humility, to recognize that your wins are not purely your own doing, and your losses are not purely your own fault. When you understand that, you stop judging yourself and others by outcomes alone. You start looking at process, at strategy, at the things you actually control. You have a choice. Live in the illusion that you are the master of your destiny, that every win is earned and every loss is deserved. Or live in reality, messy, uncertain, humbling reality. That's the key. Let's look at the other side of the coin. Risk. In 2007, a financial analyst makes a brilliant, well-researched bet against subprime mortgages. He studied the data. He's modeled the probabilities. He has a 90% chance of being right. He makes the trade. In 2008, the housing market collapses. He makes a fortune. He's called a genius. Now, take another analyst. Same year, same data, same 90% probability. He makes the same trade, but his timing is off by 3 months. The market doesn't crash when he expects. His fund blows up. He loses everything. He's called an idiot. Same decision, same strategy, different outcome. One is a genius. One is a failure. Why? Luck, risk, the invisible twins that dance around every human endeavor. A good decision with a 90% chance of success can still fail. A bad decision with a 10% chance of success can still win. Never, ever confuse outcomes with strategy. Never look at a winner and assume they were wise. Never look at a loser and assume they were foolish. You don't know what role luck played. You don't know what risk destroyed. This is why the world of money is so confusing. We see billionaires and assume they have the secret formula. We see bankruptcies and assume the person was an idiot. We're wrong, often, in both directions. The truth is harder to stomach. Some people win despite terrible decisions because the coin flipped their way. Some people lose despite brilliant decisions because the coin flipped against them. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can handle this uncertainty. You don't need the world to be fair to play the game. So what do you do with this uncomfortable truth? 2 things. First, be humble about your successes. When you win, when your investments perform, when your business thrives, when your career takes off, pause. Acknowledge the luck, the timing, the forces beyond your control. The mother's club that bought a computer terminal instead of curtains. This is not false modesty. It's clear-eyed reality. It keeps you from becoming arrogant, from taking reckless risks, from assuming you have the Midas touch. Because the moment you believe your own hype, the market will remind you that you're mortal. Second, be merciful about your failures. When you lose, when your plans crumble, when the market turns against you, pause. Acknowledge the risk, the randomness, the forces beyond your control. This is not an excuse to avoid accountability. It's a recognition that not every failure is a moral failing. You can make all the right moves and still lose. That's not weakness. That's life. Beating yourself up for bad luck is like punishing yourself for rain. The critical skill is learning to judge decisions, not outcomes. This is harder than it sounds. Our brains are wired to connect results to causes. Winner equals smart. Loser equals dumb. It's a shortcut. It's efficient. And it's often wrong. To break this pattern, you need a new habit. After any significant financial outcome, ask yourself 2 questions. 1. What role did luck play in this result? 2. What role did risk play? Not to diminish your effort, not to excuse your mistakes, just to see clearly, just to learn the right lessons. Because if you attribute a lucky win to your own brilliance, you'll take bigger risks next time and get crushed. If you attribute an unlucky loss to your own stupidity, you'll become paralyzed and miss opportunities. You are the master of your own decision-making. You are not the master of the dice. Let me give you a practical example. You buy a stock. It doubles in a year. You feel like a genius. But before you quit your day job, ask the question, did I actually predict something the market didn't see? Or did I just get swept up in a speculative bubble that could have popped any minute? If it's the latter, your win was luck. Learn the difference. Or you start a business. It fails. You feel like a failure. But before you swear off entrepreneurship forever, ask, did I execute poorly? Or did I just launch at the wrong moment in an unpredictable economy? If it's the latter, your failure was risk. Learn the difference. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. This phrase is your anchor. Repeat it when you're flying high. Repeat it when you're down in the dirt. It will keep you balanced. It will keep you humble. It will keep you in the game long enough for the law of large numbers to work in your favor. Your action protocol for integrating luck and risk. 1. The outcome audit. Look back at one significant financial success in your life. Write down 3 factors within your control that contributed. Then write down 3 factors outside your control. Be honest. Let the humility sink in. 2. The failure reframe. Look back at one significant financial failure. Write down 3 factors within your control that you could improve. Then write down 3 factors outside your control that were simply bad luck. Be merciful. Let the shame dissolve. 3. The forward commitment. From now on, when you make a financial decision, you will judge it by its process, not its outcome. Did you gather good information? Did you consider the risks? Did you align the decision with your values and goals? That's all you control. The rest is up to the twins. This is how you build resilience. This is how you keep playing the game when others quit. You stop tying your self-worth to every market fluctuation. You stop assuming every win proves your genius and every loss proves your stupidity. You just keep making good decisions over and over, trusting that the odds will eventually work in your favor. You are not the puppet of luck. You are not the victim of risk. You are the strategist who accounts for both. Now, with humility installed and the twins acknowledged, we must confront the most dangerous trap in the psychology of money. The trap that has destroyed more wealth than any market crash. The trap of never enough. We must define what you're actually playing for. Moving to Chapter 3, Never Enough, the Trap of More. And if you're learning to separate outcomes from strategy and want to keep your financial psychology calibrated, hit subscribe. It's a small decision you control, a choice to feed your mind with perspective, not noise. The rest is up to luck and risk. But this one choice, that's all you. Chapter 3 is Never Enough, the Trap of More. Let me tell you about a man who had everything. His name was Rajat Gupta. He was the managing director of McKinsey & Company, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the world. He sat on the boards of Goldman Sachs and Procter & Gamble. He was worth tens of millions of dollars. He had achieved the pinnacle of business success. By any objective measure, he had won. In 2011, Gupta was convicted of insider trading. He had passed confidential information to a hedge fund manager, trying to make a few $1,000,000 more. He lost everything. His reputation, his freedom, his legacy, all for money he didn't need. All because enough was never enough. This is the trap, and it doesn't just catch criminals. It catches everyone who never defines what enough actually means. Modern capitalism is a miracle. It generates wealth, lifts billions out of poverty, and creates opportunities our ancestors couldn't dream of. But it has a dark twin. It generates envy. Constantly. Relentlessly. There will always be someone richer, faster, luckier, more successful. Always. The game has no finish line. The goalpost moves every time you get close. You have a choice. Play the infinite game of comparison and lose your soul. Or define your own finish line and win your life back. That's the key. Let's look at the mechanics of the trap. You set a goal. When I make $100,000 a year, I'll be happy. You work. You sacrifice. You reach 100,000. And immediately, something shifts. You meet people who make 200,000. You see friends buying bigger houses, nicer cars. The goalpost moves. Now you need 200,000. Then 500. Then 1,000,000. Then 10. This isn't greed. It's adaptation. The human brain is wired to adjust to new circumstances. What was once extraordinary becomes ordinary. What was once enough becomes not enough. It's a survival mechanism that works beautifully for hunting and gathering. It's a disaster for modern wealth. The dangerous cycle looks like this. You achieve a goal. The satisfaction lasts approximately 3 weeks. You recalibrate your expectations upward. You feel empty again. You chase the next goal. Repeat until death. Or until you wake up and realize you've traded your life for numbers on a screen. A bigger house requires more maintenance. A higher status demands more performance. More money brings more complexity, taxes, investments, people wanting a piece. There is no finish line if you don't paint one yourself. The track extends to the horizon. You will run until you collapse. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can see the trap before it closes. Let me give you the example of Bernie Madoff. He ran the largest Ponzi scheme in history, stealing billions from investors. He wasn't poor when he started. He was already wealthy, respected, successful. But he wanted more. He wanted the status, the awe, the adoration that came with being a legendary money manager. He risked everything and lost everything for more of something he already had. The question Madoff never asked himself, the question Gupta never asked, the question you must ask is this: what is enough? Enough is not a number. It's a philosophy. It's the recognition that some things are worth more than money. Your reputation, your peace, your family, your health, your sleep. There is no amount of money worth sacrificing these things. Because if you sacrifice them to get more, you'll end up with more and nothing else. There is no amount of money worth sacrificing your sleep. Say it again. There is no amount of money worth sacrificing your sleep. Not 1 million. Not 10 million. Not 1 billion. Because if you can't sleep, you can't enjoy it. If you've destroyed your relationships, you have no one to share it with. If you've lost your integrity, you can't look at yourself in the mirror. Enough is when the marginal value of additional money is outweighed by the marginal cost of getting it. When the stress, the time, the risk, the compromise to your values, when all of that exceeds the happiness another dollar would bring. That's enough. Most people never stop to calculate that equation. They just run. Let's get practical. How do you define enough? Not in theory, in your actual life. Step 1. Inventory your current enough. Right now, stop and ask, what do I already have that I would not trade for any amount of money? Make the list. Your health, your partner, your children, your closest friendships, your reputation for honesty, your ability to sleep through the night. These are the things money can't buy and can't replace. They are your true wealth. Write them down. Step 2. Calculate your enough number. This is not about greed. It's about clarity. What does enough actually mean in dollars? Not what your neighbor has. Not what society tells you to want. What do you need to live a life of meaning, security, and peace? Calculate it. Rent or mortgage, food, healthcare, education for your kids, a reasonable amount for travel, hobbies, generosity, a margin for emergencies. That's your number. Everything beyond that is optional. Everything beyond that comes with a choice. Is the cost of getting it worth the benefit? Step 3. Build your enough stop sign. When you hit your number, you need a mechanism to stop, to recognize that you've arrived. This might be a specific savings target. It might be a certain age. It might be a feeling when the stress of getting more outweighs the joy of having it. But you need a sign, a pre-committed moment when you say, this is enough. I choose to stop running and start living. This is not about quitting ambition. It's about redirecting ambition. Once you have enough, your energy can flow to other things, to contribution, to mastery, to relationships, to experiences, to rest. The point of having enough is that you finally get to do something else with your life. The tragedy of the never enough trap is that it steals your second act. You spend your whole life climbing the mountain, and when you reach the top, you're too exhausted to enjoy the view. You look around and realize you climbed the wrong mountain entirely. You don't need their permission to stop climbing. You don't need the world's approval to declare that you have enough. You are the master of your own finish line. Let me tell you about a different kind of person. The investor who sold at the top of the dot-com bubble not because they predicted the crash, but because they had already hit their number and decided that was enough. They missed out on the last 6 months of gains. They also missed out on the crash that followed. They slept through it. They were called foolish by those who kept riding the rocket. Then they were called geniuses by the same people after the crash. They weren't geniuses. They just knew what enough meant. You have a choice. Be the person who always needs more and never has enough. Or be the person who defines enough, reaches it, and lives the rest of their life free from the chase. It's not about having less. It's about wanting wisely. Your action protocol for breaking the never enough trap. 1. The comparison detox. For 1 week, unfollow or mute the accounts that make you feel inadequate. The ones showcasing wealth, success, perfection. You are not eliminating them forever. You are giving your brain a break from the envy machine. See how you feel. 2. The enough inventory. Tonight, write down your list of things money can't buy. Read it aloud. Let yourself feel the weight of what you already possess. 3. The enough number. Calculate your number this week. Be honest. Be realistic. Write it down. This is your finish line. You can always adjust it later, but you can't adjust what you've never defined. This is how you win the game. Not by having the most at the end, but by recognizing at every stage that the scoreboard you're playing on is the only one that matters. The crowd cheering for someone else's victory? That's not your crowd. Your crowd is the people who love you, the peace you've cultivated, the life you've built. And they're not cheering for your net worth. They're cheering for your presence. There is no amount of money worth sacrificing your sleep. Because when you're finally awake in the middle of the night, counting money you don't need, wondering why you feel empty, you'll realize you traded the only thing that mattered for more of something that never mattered at all. Define enough. Protect it. And for the first time in your life, be free. Now, with the trap identified and your finish line defined, we must understand the single most powerful force in wealth creation. The force Einstein called the eighth wonder of the world. The force that turns small, consistent actions into staggering results. The force that requires only two things: time and patience. We must understand the confounding magic of compounding. Moving to Chapter 4, Confounding Compounding, the eighth wonder. And if you're ready to define your enough and stop running someone else's race, hit subscribe. It's a small declaration of independence, a choice to fill your feed with perspective instead of envy. The comparison machine will keep running. You don't have to keep attending. Coming over to Chapter 4, which discusses Confounding Compounding, the eighth wonder. Let me ask you a question. What's bigger, a massive one-time gain or a small, consistent return that compounds for decades? Your intuition says the massive gain. Your intuition is wrong. Embarrassingly wrong. Dangerously wrong. Albert Einstein, if the quote is real, called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. Those who understand it, earn it. Those who don't, pay it. The reason it's a wonder isn't because the math is complicated. The math is simple. It's multiplication. The reason it's a wonder is because the results are so counterintuitive, so staggeringly, mind-bendingly large that the human brain cannot intuitively grasp them. Let me show you. If you invest $10,000 and earn a 10% annual return, after 1 year you have $11,000. After 10 years, you have about $26,000. That's nice. That's not a wonder. But here's where the magic kicks in. After 20 years, you have $67,000. After 30 years, $174,000. After 40 years, $452,000. After 50 years, $1.17 million. That $10,000, left alone for 50 years at 10%, becomes more than $1 million. Not because you added anything. Not because you were brilliant. Because you gave it time. Because you let the machine work. This is confounding. Your brain looks at a 10% return and thinks, that's just a little bit. Your brain cannot intuitively multiply that little bit across 5 decades. It's not wired for exponential thinking. We're wired for linear thinking, for hunting and gathering, for immediate results. Compound interest operates on a timescale that mocks our evolutionary hardware. You have a choice. Trust your gut, which will tell you to chase quick wins and ignore slow growth. Or trust the math, which tells you that time is the only input you can't replace. That's the key. Let's look at the greatest example in modern financial history. Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett is worth over $100 billion. He is widely considered the greatest investor of all time. When people tell his story, they focus on his stock picks, his genius, his legendary acquisitions like Coca-Cola and American Express. They tell you he's the smartest guy in the room. They're missing the point. Warren Buffett started investing at age 10. He's been at it for over 80 years. 80 years. If he had started at age 30 and retired at 60, a perfectly normal career, his net worth would be maybe $10 million. Still successful, not a legend. His secret isn't brilliance. His secret is endurance. He started young, and he lived long. He let the machine work for 8 decades. That's it. That's the whole story. Anyone who earns 22% annual returns for 80 years becomes Warren Buffett. The returns are impressive, yes, but the time is the real story. Here's the kicker. Most of his wealth came after his 60th birthday, after his 70th, after his 80th. The first 50 years built the foundation. The last 30 built the empire. If he had stopped at 60, we wouldn't know his name. Time is the only input you can't replace. You can borrow money. You can learn new skills. You can find new opportunities. But you cannot borrow time. You cannot buy more years. The single greatest advantage in wealth building is starting early and staying consistent. That's it. That's the secret they don't put on magazine covers. Let's take this beyond money, because compounding applies to everything that matters. Knowledge compounds. Every book you read builds on the last. Every skill you practice layers on previous reps. The person who reads one book a month for 10 years isn't 10 times smarter than when they started. They're exponentially more knowledgeable because ideas combine, connect, create new insights. The first book gives you facts. The 100th book gives you wisdom. That's compounding. Relationships compound. Every genuine interaction with a person builds trust. Every kept promise deepens connection. The friend you've known for 30 years isn't just a friend you've known a long time. They're a person who has been with you through versions of yourself that no longer exist. That depth cannot be manufactured quickly. It can only be compounded over time. Skills compound. The first year of learning an instrument is frustrating. You can barely play a scale. The 5th year, you're making music. The 20th year, you're creating sounds that move people to tears. The skill didn't just get better. It transformed. Each year built on the last in ways you couldn't predict at the beginning. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can harness this force in every area of your life. But you must understand what it requires. Compound interest requires 2 things: consistency and time. That's it. Not brilliance. Not lucky breaks. Not perfect timing. Consistency and time. Consistency means you keep showing up. You keep investing. You keep reading. You keep practicing. Even when it's boring. Even when it feels like nothing is happening. Especially then. Because the magic happens in the long, flat middle that looks like nothing. Time means you start now. Not next year. Not when you have more money or more knowledge or more confidence. Now. Because the single most important factor in compounding is how long the machine runs. Every day you delay is a day of compounding you will never get back. You can't make up lost time. You can only start now and let the clock run. This is why young people have such an enormous advantage. A 25-year-old who invests $100 a month until retirement will have more money than a 40-year-old who invests $1,000 a month. The math is brutal. The 25-year-old has time. The 40-year-old has money. Time wins every time. But here's the good news. If you're not 25, you still have today. And today is earlier than tomorrow. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Start the compounding machine today. Let it run. Don't touch it. Don't interrupt it. Don't get impatient and pull it out to chase something shiny. The greatest enemy of compounding is interruption. Every time you stop, you reset the clock. Every time you chase a hot tip and lose your principal, you lose not just the money but the time it would have grown. The investors who win aren't the ones with the highest returns. They're the ones who never blow up. The ones who stay in the game long enough for the math to work. Let me give you a practical example. 2 investors. Investor A starts at age 25, invests $5,000 a year for 10 years, then stops. Never adds another dime. Investor B starts at age 35, invests $5,000 a year for 30 years, all the way to 65. Who has more at retirement, assuming 8% returns? Investor A, the one who invested for only 10 years. Because they started earlier. Because they gave time 10 extra years to work. That's the power. That's the wonder. Time is the only input you can't replace. You cannot get back the years you wasted. You cannot buy more decades. But you can start now. You can let whatever time you have left do its work. Even if you're 50, even if you're 60, even if you're 70, the next 20 years of compounding will produce results you cannot achieve by any other means. Here's your action protocol for harnessing the 8th wonder. 1. Start something today. Not tomorrow. Today. Open that investment account. Read 10 pages. Make that call. Send that email. The machine starts now. You don't need their permission to begin. You are the master of your own compounding machine. 2. Automate the consistency. Set up automatic investments. Schedule daily reading time. Put recurring calendar reminders for connection. Remove the need for willpower. Let the system run. The key is to make consistency effortless, not heroic. 3. Ignore the short term. Do not check your progress every day. Do not measure after a month. Measure after years. Decades. The line will be bumpy. The market will crash. The skill will plateau. The relationship will have conflicts. That's normal. That's the line. The trend is what matters. Trust the trend, not the noise. 4. Protect the machine. Do not interrupt the compounding. Do not cash out to chase something shiny. Do not stop reading because you're busy. Do not neglect relationships because you're stressed. The machine only works while it runs. Keep it running. This is the 8th wonder. It's not flashy. It doesn't make headlines. It's just the slow, steady drip of water on stone. Day after day, year after year. And one day, you look up, and there's a canyon where there used to be flat ground. You wonder how it happened. You wonder where the time went. And you realize, the time was the point. Time is the only input you can't replace. You can't buy it. You can't borrow it. You can't earn it back. But you can use it. You can point it at something and let it work. You can start today and let the machine run. That's all it takes. Not genius. Not luck. Just time and consistency. You are now armed with the most powerful force in the universe of money. The force that turns the patient into the wealthy, the consistent into the master, the ordinary into the extraordinary. The force that requires only that you stay in the game long enough for magic to happen. You've seen the power of patience. You understand that time is the only input you can't replace. But here's the critical distinction that most people miss. The skills that make you wealthy are not the same skills that keep you wealthy. The mindset that builds a fortune is different from the mindset that preserves it. And most people master one but fail at the other. The person who takes risks to get rich is often the same person who takes risks to stay rich and gets wiped out. The person who builds a business with optimism and aggression is often the same person who fails to protect it with paranoia and humility. Getting wealthy and staying wealthy are two different games. You must learn to play both. Moving to Chapter 5, Getting Wealthy versus Staying Wealthy. And if you're ready to start your compounding machine today and learn the difference between building and preserving, hit subscribe. Consider it your first consistent deposit, a small investment of attention that compounds with every video. Not because any single one changes your life, because over time, the ideas connect, the insights accumulate, and one day, you realize you think differently about money, about time, about everything. That's compounding. Start now. Time is the only input you can't replace. Our next chapter is Chapter 5, Getting Wealthy versus Staying Wealthy. Let me tell you about two different people. The first person is 25 years old. They have nothing to lose and everything to gain. They take risks. They start businesses. They invest in volatile assets. They bet on themselves with the reckless confidence of youth. This is how fortunes begin. This is getting wealthy. The second person is 65 years old. They have a lifetime of accumulation to protect. They have a family to provide for. They have a reputation built over decades. They do not take the same risks. They prioritize preservation over growth. They are paranoid about losing what they've built. This is staying wealthy. Same person? Often yes. Same mindset? Almost never. And that's the problem. Getting wealthy and staying wealthy are two completely different games. They require different skills, different mindsets, different psychological wiring. Most people learn one game and assume it applies to the other. They get rich by taking risks, then keep taking risks and get wiped out. Or they stay safe their whole lives and never get rich in the first place. The masters of money learn to play both games. They know when to attack and when to defend. They know that the rules change once you have something to lose. You have a choice. Learn one game and hope it's enough. Or understand that wealth has seasons and you must adapt. That's the key. Let's look at the contrast. Getting wealthy requires optimism. You have to believe that the future will be better than the present, that your idea will work, that the market will go up, that the risk is worth taking. Without optimism, you never start. You never take the shot. You stay small and safe forever. Staying wealthy requires paranoia. You have to believe that the future could be worse than you expect, that your success could be threatened, that the market could crash, that a single bad decision could undo years of good ones. Without paranoia, you get complacent. You take unnecessary risks. You assume the good times will last forever. They won't. Getting wealthy requires aggression. You have to move when others are hesitating. You have to bet big when you see opportunity. You have to be willing to look foolish in the short term. Staying wealthy requires humility. You have to admit that you don't know what's coming, that your success might be partly luck, that the market can turn against anyone. You have to build margin, diversify, and protect your position. Getting wealthy is about maximizing returns. You want the highest possible growth. You're willing to accept volatility, uncertainty, and risk because the upside is worth it. Staying wealthy is about survival. You want to avoid the blow-up. You're willing to accept lower returns in exchange for never getting wiped out. Because one blow-up can erase a decade of gains. One bad year can undo 10 good years. The math is brutal. Let me give you the numbers. Imagine two investors. Investor A earns 20% returns for 9 years, then loses 50% in year 10. Investor B earns a steady 8% every year for 10 years. After 10 years, who has more money? Investor B, the steady, boring, paranoid investor. Investor A's spectacular gains were erased by one catastrophic loss. The 20% returns didn't matter. The 50% loss wiped them out. This is the lesson. The goal is not to be right. The goal is to stay in the game. You can be wrong half the time and still win big if you survive. You can be right most of the time and lose everything if you blow up once. Survival is the only strategy that matters over the long term. Warren Buffett has 2 rules of investing. Rule number 1, never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. This sounds simplistic. It's not. It's profound. Buffett doesn't mean you should never have a losing investment. He means you should never have a catastrophic loss. Never take a risk that could wipe you out. Never bet the farm. Never let a single mistake end the game. Why? Because if you stay in the game, you keep compounding. If you get wiped out, you start over. And starting over at 50 is very different from starting over at 25. You don't have the same time. You don't have the same energy. You don't have the same runway. The game ends. Morgan Housel puts it perfectly. There are a million ways to get wealthy, but only one way to stay wealthy. Some combination of frugality and paranoia. Frugality means you don't let your lifestyle creep up to match your income. You keep your expenses low even as your wealth grows. Why? Because low expenses give you margin. They mean you don't need high returns to survive. You can wait out the bad times. You can sleep at night. Paranoia means you always assume the worst could happen. Not because you're pessimistic, but because you're prepared. You keep cash on hand. You diversify. You avoid leverage. You build a fortress around your wealth so that when the storm comes, and it will come, you're not destroyed. Let me tell you about the investors who survived the dot-com crash. They weren't the ones who predicted the crash. They were the ones who had margin. They hadn't borrowed to buy stocks. They hadn't bet everything on tech. They had some cash, some bonds, some diversification. When the crash came, they didn't have to sell at the bottom. They could wait. They could ride it out. And when the recovery came, they were still in the game. The investors who got wiped out, they were the ones who went all in. The ones who used leverage. The ones who were so certain the good times would never end that they left no room for error. They were right for years. Then they were wrong once. And that once erased everything. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can learn from their mistakes without making them yourself. Let's get practical. How do you build a wealth preservation mindset while you're still in the wealth building phase? How do you balance the optimism you need to grow with the paranoia you need to survive? Step 1. Define your never list. What will you never do, no matter how good the opportunity seems? Never invest in something you don't understand. Never use leverage to buy volatile assets. Never put more than X% in a single stock. Never let your lifestyle exceed Y% of your income. Write these down. They are your survival rules. They are not optional. They are your fortress walls. Step 2. Build margin. Margin is the gap between what you need and what you have. It's the cash in the bank, the low expenses, the diversified portfolio, the skills that could earn income in a downturn. Margin means you don't have to make desperate decisions. You can wait. You can think. You can survive. Calculate your margin. If you lost your job tomorrow, how long could you survive without changing your lifestyle? 6 months? A year? 3 years? That's your margin. If it's less than 12 months, your priority is not higher returns. Your priority is building margin. Step 3. Separate the games. Recognize that different parts of your life require different strategies. Your get wealthy money, the money you're investing aggressively while you're young, can take more risk. Your stay wealthy money, the money you'll need in retirement, the money that supports your family, must be managed with paranoia. Don't confuse the two. Don't risk what you need for what you want. Step 4. Sleep test every decision. Before any major financial decision, ask yourself, will this let me sleep at night? If the answer is no, don't do it, no matter how good the math looks. Because if you can't sleep, you'll make worse decisions. If you're anxious, you'll sell at the wrong time. If you're stressed, you'll miss opportunities. The best financial plan is the one you can actually stick with. And you can only stick with a plan that lets you sleep. The goal is not to be right. The goal is to stay in the game. Repeat that. Write it down. Tattoo it on your brain. The goal is not to be right. The goal is to stay in the game. You can be wrong about the next market move. You can be wrong about your investment thesis. You can be wrong about your career path. None of that matters if you stay in the game long enough to be right eventually. But if you get wiped out, you don't get to be right eventually. You're done. The greatest investors in history aren't the ones with the highest annual returns. They're the ones who never blew up. They're the ones who survived every crash, every bear market, every economic disaster. They didn't predict them. They just survived them. And because they survived, they kept compounding. And because they kept compounding, they won. You don't need to be brilliant. You need to be durable. You need to be the cockroach that survives the nuclear winter while the brilliant dinosaurs go extinct. Not glamorous. But here at the end, who's still standing? Let me give you a real-world example. Look at the list of the world's richest people. Many of them have been on that list for decades. How? Not by taking bigger risks than everyone else. By taking calculated risks and then becoming extremely conservative with what they built. They have teams of people whose only job is to protect their wealth. They don't chase the next hot thing. They let other people do that. They've already won. Their job now is not to lose. You may not have a team of wealth protectors, but you have yourself. And yourself, properly trained, is enough. The goal is not to be right. The goal is to stay in the game. This is the mindset shift that separates the temporary wealthy from the permanently wealthy. The ones who get rich and lose it all were playing one game. The ones who get rich and stay rich learn to play a different game once they had something to lose. You have a choice. Be the gambler who keeps betting until the house wins. Or be the builder who, once the house is built, shifts from construction to maintenance. The builder knows that a house that stands for 100 years is worth more than a skyscraper that collapses in 10. Your action protocol for staying wealthy. 1. Conduct the blow-up audit. Look at your current financial situation. Ask, what single event could wipe me out? A market crash? A job loss? A health crisis? A bad investment? Identify the risks. Then build a plan to survive them. 2. Build your paranoia checklist. Write down 3 specific actions you will take to protect your wealth. Increase cash reserves. Reduce debt. Diversify investments. Buy insurance. Whatever applies. These are not optional. They are your survival kit. 3. Practice the sleep test. For the next 30 days, before any financial decision, ask, will this let me sleep at night? If the answer is no, don't do it. Even if it seems like a great opportunity. Even if everyone else is doing it. Your sleep is non-negotiable. 4. Separate your buckets. Create 2 mental accounts, or real accounts, for your money. The growth bucket takes calculated risks. The survival bucket is managed with extreme paranoia. Never let the growth bucket threaten the survival bucket. You are now equipped with the dual mindset. You know how to build. You know how to protect. You understand that getting wealthy and staying wealthy are different games, and you are learning to play both. But there's another layer to this. Even with the right mindset, you will face a psychological challenge that destroys more wealth than any market crash. The challenge of envy. The trap of comparison. The feeling that no matter how much you have, it's never enough because someone else has more. We've touched on this before. Now we must go deeper. Because the ability to define enough is the only thing that will save you from the endless chase. Moving to Chapter 6, the seduction of pessimism. And if you're learning to balance the games of getting and staying wealthy, let this channel be part of your survival kit. Hit subscribe. It's a small deposit in your mental margin account. A little extra perspective when the world feels chaotic. The goal is not to be right every time. The goal is to stay in the game. This is one way to do it. Next chapter is Chapter 6, Tails, You Win, the Power of Asymmetry. Let me tell you about the most important chart you'll never see. It's a chart of the stock market's daily returns. If you look at it, you'll see thousands of days. Most of them are small movements. Up a little, down a little. Nothing dramatic. Boring, actually. But then you look closer. You find that a tiny handful of days, less than 1% of them, account for the vast majority of the market's total gains. If you missed those few days, your lifetime returns would be cut in half. In half. Think about that. You could be right 99% of the time, make decent decisions every single day, and still lose the game if you miss the 1% that really matters. Or you could be wrong 99% of the time, make terrible decisions almost every day, and still win big if you happen to be right on the few days that count. This is the power of tails. In investing, in business, in life, a tiny number of events drive the vast majority of results. The distribution is not normal. It's not a bell curve. It's a power law. A few things matter enormously. Most things matter hardly at all. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. This is not an excuse for being wrong. It's a revelation about how the world actually works. The people who win big aren't the ones who are right most often. They're the ones who ensure that when they are right, it really, really matters. You have a choice. Try to be right about everything and exhaust yourself chasing perfection. Or accept that you'll be wrong most of the time, but structure your life so that your wins are huge and your losses are small. That's the key. Let's look at venture capital. This is the purest example of tail power in finance. A typical venture capital fund invests in dozens of startups. Most of them fail. Completely. Zero return. Some of them do okay. They return a little money, maybe double your investment. A very small number, maybe 1 or 2 out of 50, become massive successes. They return 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times your money. The fund's entire return comes from those 1 or 2 investments. The 48 that failed or did okay. Irrelevant. The tails drive everything. This is why venture capitalists say yes to so many crazy ideas. They know they can't predict which one will work. So they place many small bets, knowing most will fail, hoping that one will change the world. And when it does, it pays for all the failures and then some. You are not a venture capitalist, but you can apply the same logic to your life. Think about your career. How many of your daily tasks actually move the needle? Probably a small fraction. A few key projects, a few critical relationships, a few major decisions. These shape your entire professional trajectory. The rest is noise. Important noise, maybe, but still noise. Think about your investments. How many of your picks will be huge winners? Not many. Most will be average. Some will lose. But if you have a few that compound for decades, they'll dominate your portfolio. This is why diversification matters. You don't know which ones will be the tails. So you own many and let the winners run. Think about your relationships. How many people truly shape your life? A handful. A partner, a mentor, a few close friends. The rest are acquaintances. Important, yes, but not the tails. The tails are the ones who show up when everything falls apart. The lesson is radical. You can be wrong most of the time. You can make bad investments. You can fail at projects. You can be rejected, disappointed, embarrassed. None of it matters if you have a few big wins that change everything. The key is structuring your life so that your losses are small and your wins are huge. This requires a specific mindset, a willingness to look foolish in the short term, a tolerance for failure, a refusal to let the strikes add up in your head. Imagine a baseball player who strikes out twice, then hits a home run. The crowd forgets the strikeouts. They remember the home run. Your life is the same. People will forget your failures if your successes are undeniable. But more importantly, you will forget them. The wins rewrite the narrative. Let me give you a real-world example. Jeff Bezos started Amazon after leaving a comfortable job on Wall Street. His parents invested $250,000, their life savings, in a company that sold books online. At the time, it looked crazy. Most people thought it would fail. For years, it did lose money. For years, Bezos looked foolish. Today, that investment is worth billions. The years of losses? Irrelevant. The skepticism? Forgotten. The tails won. Bezos understood something profound. He didn't need to be right about every decision. He needed to be right about the big one. He needed Amazon to become the tail. Everything else was detail. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can handle being wrong most of the time if you know that the few times you're right will change everything. But here's the catch. You have to stay in the game long enough for the tails to appear. If you quit after the first strikeout, you never get to the home run. If you sell after every loss, you never capture the gain. Survival is not just about avoiding disaster. It's about giving your winners time to work. This is where the previous chapter connects. Getting wealthy requires risk and optimism. Staying wealthy requires paranoia and survival. Tails, you win, requires both. You take the risks, knowing most will fail. You survive, so you're still there when the winners emerge. Let's get practical. How do you apply tail thinking to your life? Step 1. Place many small bets. Don't put everything on one idea. Don't assume you know which investment, which project, which relationship will be the winner. You don't know. No one knows. So place many small bets. Try things. Experiment. Fail cheaply. The goal is to increase your surface area for luck. This applies to investments. Own a diversified portfolio. You don't know which sectors will outperform, so own them all. Career. Develop multiple skills. Take on varied projects. You don't know which will lead to your big break, so create options. Relationships. Meet people. Nurture connections. You don't know who will be important in 10 years, so be generous with your attention. Step 2. Let your winners run. When something works, don't cut it short. Don't take profits too early because you're afraid. The tails need time to grow. Amazon was a small book retailer for years. If Bezos had sold when it doubled, he'd have missed the billions. In investing, this means holding your best positions. In career, this means doubling down on what works. In relationships, this means investing deeply in the connections that matter. The winners are rare. Don't abandon them. Step 3. Cut your losers quickly. The flip side of letting winners run is cutting losers fast. You don't know which bets will be tails, so you need to limit the damage from the ones that aren't. If something isn't working, get out. Don't let a small loss become a big one. Don't let a failing project consume years of your life. Fail fast. Fail cheap. Move on. This is the asymmetry. Small losses, big wins. Fail often, but fail small. Win rarely, but win huge. The math works. Step 4. Ignore the short-term noise. When you're striking out, the world will tell you you're wrong. Friends will doubt. Critics will mock. You'll doubt yourself. This is the price of tail chasing. You have to tolerate being wrong most of the time. You have to accept that you'll look foolish in the short term. The question is, can you handle it? Can you keep swinging when the strikes pile up? Can you ignore the noise and focus on the one swing that matters? This is where discipline meets psychology. You are the master of your own mind. You don't need their permission to keep swinging. You don't need their approval to be wrong today. You need only to be right when it counts. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. Say it again. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. Not because you're lucky, because you've structured your life to capture the tails. Because you've placed many bets, cut your losers, and let your winners run. Because you've stayed in the game long enough for the math to work. Let me give you a personal example. When I started writing, most of my articles went nowhere. Hundreds of them. Thousands of hours. Most readers didn't care. Most got zero engagement. If I had judged my career by those failures, I'd have quit years ago. But a few articles took off. A few went viral. A few reached millions of people. Those few changed everything. They opened doors. They built an audience. They created opportunities. The hundreds of failures? Irrelevant. The few wins paid for everything. This is tails, you win. This is the power of asymmetry. Your action protocol for harnessing the tails. 1. Conduct a portfolio audit. Look at your investments, your projects, your relationships. Identify the potential tails. The ones that could be huge if they work. Are you giving them enough room to grow? Are you cutting the losers quickly enough? 2. Start one small bet this week. Something that could be a tail, a side project, a new investment, a relationship to nurture. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be a bet. Place it. See what happens. 3. Review your loss tolerance. Ask yourself, can I handle being wrong most of the time? If the answer is no, you need to adjust your expectations or your strategy. The tails require patience. They require resilience. They require a mindset that separates self-worth from short-term outcomes. 4. Create an asymmetry scorecard. For any major decision, ask, what's the downside? What's the upside? If the downside is small and the upside is large, do it. Even if the probability of success is low. The math favors you. This is how you win in a world driven by tails. Not by being right most of the time. By being right when it matters most. By ensuring that your wins are huge and your losses are small. By staying in the game long enough for the magic to happen. You are now equipped with one of the most powerful mental models in finance. The understanding that a few things drive everything. the willingness to be wrong most of the time, the patience to let your winners run. But there's another layer. Even with this understanding, you might still miss the point of money entirely. You might still chase returns when you should be chasing something else. You might still measure wealth in dollars when the real wealth is invisible. We must now talk about what money actually buys. Not things, not status, something far more valuable. Moving to Chapter 7, Freedom, the highest dividend money pays. And if you're learning to embrace the power of tails and want to keep swinging even when you're striking out, hit subscribe. Consider it one of your small bets, a tiny investment of attention that might, over time, become one of the tails in your life. Most videos won't change your life, but the ones that do, they change everything. Keep swinging. Our next chapter, Chapter 7, is about freedom, the highest dividend money pays. Let me ask you a question, a real one. What do you actually want from money? Most people answer without thinking. They want things. A nicer car, a bigger house, fancier vacations, the latest gadgets, the status that comes with visible wealth. They've been trained by a lifetime of advertising to equate money with stuff. They're wrong. Not about the wanting, about what they're actually seeking. Because if you dig deeper, past the stuff, you find something else. Something universal. Something that the things were supposed to deliver, but never quite do. What people really want, what you really want, is control. Control over your time. Control over your choices. Control over who you spend your days with and what you spend them doing. The ability to wake up in the morning and ask, what do I want to do today? And actually have the freedom to answer. This is the highest dividend money pays. Not the boat, not the watch, not the square footage. The ability to say no to things you don't want to do. The ability to say yes to things you love. The ability to walk away from a bad job, a toxic relationship, a draining obligation. The ability to be present for the people you love without watching the clock. Money's greatest intrinsic value is its ability to give you control over your time. Think about that. Every dollar you save is not just a number on a screen. It's a minute of freedom. It's a small piece of your life that you have bought back from the world. The world wants your time. It wants you to work, to consume, to commute, to comply. Every dollar you save is a tiny act of rebellion. It's you saying, this portion of my life is mine. You have a choice. Spend your money on things that impress strangers and remain a slave to the next paycheck. Or spend your money on buying back your own time and become the master of your own existence. That's the key. Let me give you the words of Morgan Housel, because he says it better than anyone. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want, is priceless. It is the highest dividend money pays. Read that again. Let it sink in. The ability to do what you want. Not what your boss wants. Not what your creditors want. Not what society expects. What you want. When you want. Not at 9 a.m. on a Monday because you have to. At whatever time your body and soul feel ready. With who you want. The people you love. The people who matter. Not the people you're stuck with in a meeting room. For as long as you want. Not until the vacation days run out. Not until the project is due. As long as you choose. This is priceless. There is no amount of stuff that can substitute for this. There is no luxury car that can replicate the feeling of walking away from something you hate. There is no watch that can measure the value of a Tuesday morning spent exactly as you please. This reframes the entire purpose of saving money. Most people see saving as deprivation. They see it as saying no to things they want today so they can have things they might want tomorrow. It feels like sacrifice. It feels like punishment. But that's wrong. That's a failure of imagination. Saving is not sacrifice. Saving is purchasing. You are not depriving yourself of something today. You are buying something far more valuable than any trinket. You are buying your own freedom. You are buying back your own time. You are purchasing options on your future self. Every dollar you save is a minute of freedom purchased. Every $100 is an hour. Every 1,000 is a day. Every 10,000 is a week. Every 100,000 is a month. Every million is years. You are not hoarding currency. You are accumulating autonomy. You are building a time machine that lets you travel to a future where you don't have to do things you don't want to do. This is the reframe that changes everything. Let me tell you about two different retirees. The first retiree has $1 million. They spend their days playing golf, traveling, enjoying hobbies. They are free. Their money buys them time. The second retiree also has $1 million. But they can't relax. They're obsessed with getting more. They check their portfolio constantly. They worry about market fluctuations. They're still mentally at work, still chasing, still anxious. Their money doesn't buy them time because they can't stop. The difference isn't the money. It's the mindset. The first person understands what money is for. The second person forgot. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can learn the difference before it's too late. Let's get practical. How do you orient your financial life around freedom instead of stuff? Step 1. Calculate your freedom number. What would it take to give you complete control over your time? Not to retire forever necessarily, just to have options. To be able to say no to a job you hate. To take a year off to write a book. To spend 6 months with an aging parent. To start a business without the terror of bankruptcy. This is your FU fund. Your freedom stash. Your I can walk away money. Calculate it. How much do you need to cover your basic expenses for 1 year? For 5 years? For the rest of your life if you lived modestly? That number is not a retirement target. It's a liberation target. It's the amount that makes you free. Step 2. Track your freedom purchases. Every time you save money, reframe it. Don't think, I didn't buy that thing. Think, I just bought myself 3 hours of freedom. Don't think, I'm saving for retirement. Think, I'm accumulating options. Create a separate account if it helps. Label it Freedom Fund. Not savings. Not retirement. Freedom. Every deposit is a vote for your future autonomy. Every automatic transfer is a small act of rebellion against the machine that wants your time. Step 3. Audit your spending for freedom value. Before any major purchase, ask yourself, will this thing actually increase my freedom, or will it decrease it? A bigger house increases your mortgage, your maintenance, your need to work. It decreases freedom. A reliable car that's paid off increases freedom. An expensive car with a loan decreases freedom. A vacation that requires months of overtime to afford decreases freedom. A simple trip you can take spontaneously increases freedom. Run everything through this filter. The answer will surprise you. Step 4. Define what freedom actually means to you. Freedom is not the same for everyone. For some, it's the ability to travel. For others, it's the ability to stay home. For some, it's the ability to work on creative projects. For others, it's the ability to do nothing at all. What does freedom look like for you? Be specific. Write it down. I want to be able to spend every summer at the lake with my kids. I want to be able to quit my job and start a nonprofit. I want to be able to sleep until 9 a.m. every day. Whatever it is, name it. Then ask, how much money would it take to make that possible? That's your target. Money's greatest intrinsic value is its ability to give you control over your time. This is not about early retirement. It's not about never working again. It's about having the power to choose. It's about being able to work because you wanna, not because you have to. It's about being able to say no to things that drain you and yes to things that light you up. The richest people in the world aren't necessarily the ones with the most money. They're the ones with the most control over their time. The barista who loves their job and has no debt might be richer than the executive who hates their job and has $1 million mortgage. Not in net worth. In what actually matters. You are the master of your own world. You get to decide what wealth means. You don't need society's permission to define success as freedom instead of stuff. Let me give you a real-world example. There's a story about a hedge fund manager who made billions. He was asked what he wanted most in the world. He said, to be able to watch my daughter's soccer games without checking my phone. He had billions. He didn't have freedom. His money hadn't bought him time because he couldn't stop chasing. He had won the game and didn't know how to stop playing. Don't be that person. The purpose of money is not to accumulate more money. The purpose of money is to buy the one thing you can't get any other way. Control over your finite, irreplaceable life. Your action protocol for pursuing freedom. 1. Calculate your freedom number this week. Not someday. This week. How much would it take to give you 1 year of complete autonomy? Write it down. This is your first target. 2. Start a freedom fund. Open a separate account. Name it something that matters to you. My time. My choice. Escape fund. Whatever resonates. Automated deposit. Even $50 a month. It's not the amount. It's the intention. 3. Run the freedom filter. For the next 30 days, before any non-essential purchase, ask, does this increase my freedom or decrease it? Let the answer guide you. 4. Visualize your free day. Spend 5 minutes imagining your ideal free day. Not a vacation. A regular day where you have complete control. What do you do? Who are you with? How do you feel? Let that image be your North Star. Every financial decision either moves you toward that day or away from it. This is the reframe that changes everything. Money is not about things. It's about time. It's about options. It's about freedom. The highest dividend it pays is not interest. It's autonomy. Now, with freedom as your North Star, we must confront a paradox. If freedom is the goal, why do so many wealthy people act like they have none? Why do they keep chasing, keep accumulating, keep sacrificing their time for more money they don't need? The answer lies in a psychological trap that affects almost everyone. The trap of comparison. The trap that makes you see a wealthy person and assume they have what you want, when in reality, they're trapped in a game you don't want to play. We must now examine the man in the car. Moving to Chapter 8, the man in the car paradox. And if you're ready to redefine wealth as freedom and start buying back your own time, hit subscribe. Consider it a small investment in your most valuable asset, your perspective. Every video is a reminder that the goal is not more stuff. The goal is more control, more time, more life. This channel is one of the tools. Use it wisely. Next chapter. Chapter 8 is about the man in the car paradox. Let me tell you about a man in a car. He's driving a Ferrari. Red. Convertible. The engine growls like a hungry animal. Heads turn on every corner. People point. They whisper. They assume he's successful, important, worthy of admiration. Now let me tell you about you, watching that man. You see the car. You feel something. Envy maybe. Desire. A longing for what he has. You think, if I had that car, people would respect me. They'd see me differently. I'd finally feel like I'd made it. Here's the truth. The uncomfortable, liberating truth. You don't actually want the car. You want what you think the car will bring you. Respect. Admiration. Status. A sense of worth. The car is just the messenger. You've confused the package for the contents. And here's the deeper truth. The man in the car? He wanted the same thing. He bought the car hoping for respect. And now he's driving alone, checking to see if anyone noticed, wondering why the feeling didn't last. This is the man in the car paradox. We want respect, but we buy things hoping to get it. You have a choice. Chase the illusion and wonder why you're always empty. Or understand what you're actually seeking and find ways to get it that actually work. That's the key. Let's break down the psychology. Humans are social creatures. We're wired to care about what others think. For most of human history, being respected by your tribe was essential for survival. Get exiled, die alone. That wiring is still there. It's ancient. It's powerful. And it's easily exploited. Modern capitalism is brilliant at exploiting it. Advertisers don't sell products. They sell identity. They sell status. They sell the promise that if you buy this thing, people will see you differently. You'll be admired. You'll be respected. You'll finally be enough. It's a lie, but it's a compelling lie. And we fall for it again and again. The paradox is this. No one is as impressed by your possessions as you think they are. Think about the last time you saw someone in an expensive car. What did you actually feel? A flash of envy, maybe. A quick judgment. Then you went back to thinking about your own life, your own problems, your own desires. You didn't spend the next hour in awe of them. You spent it in your own head. People are too busy worrying about their own image to be truly impressed by yours. They're too focused on their own cars, their own houses, their own status games. Your Ferrari is a blip in their day, a momentary distraction. Then they're back to themselves. But you driving the Ferrari? You think they're all watching. You think they're all impressed. You think the car is delivering the respect you crave. It's not. It's delivering a momentary illusion. And then you're alone with your thoughts again, wondering why you still feel the same. Let me give you the master class. There are two kinds of status. Earned status comes from being someone worthy of respect. From your character, your actions, your contributions. From kindness, humility, integrity, courage. This kind of status is real. It lasts. People respect you not for what you have, but for who you are. Purchase status comes from buying things that signal wealth. The car, the watch, the house. This kind of status is hollow. It fades. People might admire the object, but they don't admire you. They admire the signal. And signals are easily copied, easily faked, easily ignored. The man in the car is chasing purchase status. He thinks it will give him earned status. It won't. Ever. Because earned status can't be bought. It can only be built. Slowly. Quietly. Through years of being the kind of person others genuinely respect. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can build earned status. You don't need the car to be enough. Let me give you a real-world example. Think of someone you truly respect, not because of their money, because of who they are. A mentor who helped you, a friend who showed up when you were struggling, a parent who sacrificed for you, a leader who acted with integrity when it was costly. Do you respect them because of their car? Of course not. You probably don't even know what they drive. You respect them because of how they made you feel, because of their character, because of their actions. Now think about someone you've seen in a fancy car. Do you respect them? Not really. You might envy them. You might wish you had what they have. But respect? That's different. Respect requires knowing someone. Respect requires seeing how they treat others. Respect is earned, not purchased. This is the paradox. The very thing you're seeking, genuine respect, cannot be obtained through the things you're buying to get it. The car won't deliver. The watch won't deliver. The house won't deliver. They'll give you a temporary hit, a flash of attention, and then you'll be right back where you started, needing another hit. So what actually works? If respect and admiration are what you truly want, and it's okay to want them, there are far cheaper and more effective ways to get them. Kindness. People remember how you make them feel. A genuinely kind person is respected far more than a wealthy jerk. It costs nothing and pays dividends forever. Humility. People are drawn to those who don't need to broadcast their worth. The humble person is trusted. The humble person is safe. The humble person is respected because they don't demand respect. Integrity. Doing the right thing when no one is watching. Keeping your word. Being reliable. This is the foundation of earned status. It takes time to build, but once built, it cannot be taken away. Contribution. Using your time, talent, or money to help others. People respect those who give, not those who take. The philanthropist is admired. The hoarder is not. These are the paths to genuine respect. They're not flashy. They don't make headlines. But they work. And they don't require a Ferrari. Let's get practical. How do you escape the man in the car paradox? Step 1. Admit what you actually want. Be honest. When you covet something expensive, ask yourself, what do I really want from this? If the answer involves other people's opinions, you're chasing purchase status. Admit it. Don't judge it. Just see it clearly. Awareness is the first step out of the trap. Step 2. Separate the signal from the substance. Recognize that expensive things are signals. They signal wealth. They don't signal character. They don't signal integrity. They don't signal kindness. They signal one thing only: the ability to spend money. That's it. Ask yourself, is this signal worth the cost? Not just the financial cost, the opportunity cost, the time you'll spend working to afford it, the energy you'll devote to maintaining it, the mental space it will occupy. Is that worth a signal that most people won't even notice? Step 3. Build earned status deliberately. Make a list of the people you truly respect. What qualities do they have? Write them down. Now ask, how can I cultivate those qualities in myself? Not to impress others, to become the kind of person others genuinely respect. This is work. It's harder than buying a car, but it's the only work that pays. Step 4. Test the paradox. The next time you see someone in an expensive car, notice your reaction. Then ask, do I actually respect this person? The answer is probably no. You don't know them. You respect the car, not the driver. Now remember, that's exactly how others see you when you're in the car. They respect the object, not you. Is that really what you want? We want respect, but we buy things hoping to get it. Say it again. We want respect, but we buy things hoping to get it. It's the oldest mistake in the book, and it's still being made every single day. The man in the car is not happy. He's chasing. He's checking his rearview mirror to see if anyone noticed. He's trapped in a game he doesn't even understand. You don't have to be that man. You can opt out. You can decide that your worth is not for sale. You can build a life so rich in character, so deep in integrity, so full of genuine connection, that no one cares what you drive, including you. You are the master of your own world. You don't need their permission to define your own worth. You don't need their admiration to feel whole. You can be enough, right now, without buying a single thing. This is freedom. Real freedom. The kind that doesn't come from a car. Let me give you a story. There's a billionaire who still drives a 20-year-old Honda. When asked why, he said, because I don't need a car to tell people who I am. I know who I am. That's the opposite of the man in the Ferrari. That's someone who understands the paradox. That's someone who has won the game. You can win too. Not by having more. By needing less. by knowing that the respect you crave can't be bought. It can only be built. Your action protocol for escaping the paradox. 1. The 30-day signal fast. For 1 month, avoid purchasing anything primarily for status. Nothing you're buying to impress others. See how it feels. Notice the urges. Notice what's underneath them. 2. The respect audit. Ask 3 people who know you well. What do you genuinely respect about me? Write down their answers. This is your earned status. This is real. This is what matters. 3. The gratitude practice. Every day, write down one thing you appreciate about yourself that has nothing to do with money or possessions. Your kindness, your sense of humor, your loyalty, your resilience. Build the habit of valuing yourself for what you are, not what you own. 4. The paradox reminder. Put a note somewhere you'll see it. They're not impressed. They're just looking. I don't need their approval. Let it be your anchor when the urge to purchase status arises. This is how you break the spell. This is how you stop chasing signals and start building substance. This is how you become the kind of person who doesn't need a Ferrari to feel worthy. Now, with the paradox exposed, we must confront the next layer. If wealth isn't about cars and watches, what is it about? If the things you see aren't the real story, where is the real wealth hiding? The answer is invisible. And that's exactly the point. Moving to Chapter 9, Wealth is what you don't see. And if you're ready to stop chasing signals and start building substance, hit subscribe. It's one of those small actions that doesn't impress anyone, except yourself. It's a vote for earned status over purchase status. A reminder that the real wealth is in what you become, not what you buy. No flash, just substance, the way it should be. Next chapter in line is Chapter 9, Wealth is what you don't see. Let me tell you about 2 people. The first person drives a brand new BMW, lives in a beautiful house in the right neighborhood, wears designer clothes, takes lavish vacations, posts it all on social media. By every external measure, they are rich. The second person drives a 10-year-old Honda, lives in a modest house in an ordinary neighborhood, wears comfortable but unremarkable clothes, takes simple vacations, posts almost nothing. By every external measure, they are ordinary. Which one is wealthy? You don't know. You can't know. Because wealth is invisible. The BMW driver might be drowning in debt. The house might be mortgaged to the rafters. The clothes might be on credit cards. The vacations might be funded by loans. By every internal measure, they are broke. The Honda driver might have $1 million in retirement accounts. The modest house might be paid off. The simple life might be funded by investment income. By every internal measure, they are wealthy. Rich and wealthy are not the same thing. Rich is what you spend. It's the car, the clothes, the restaurants, the vacations. It's visible. It's performative. It's designed to be seen. Wealth is what you keep. It's the money in accounts you don't touch, the investments you don't sell, the emergency fund you pray you never need. It's invisible. It's quiet. It's designed to work, not to show. The person in the fancy car may have negative net worth. The person in the modest sedan may be a millionaire. You cannot tell by looking. You cannot tell by what they post. You can only tell by what they don't spend. Wealth is the money you didn't spend, invested where you can't see it. This is the most important distinction in the entire book. If you understand nothing else, understand this. Wealth is hidden. By definition. Because every dollar you spend is a dollar no longer working for you. Every dollar you save and invest is a dollar building your freedom. You have a choice. Be rich and look wealthy while having nothing. Or be wealthy and look ordinary while having everything that matters. That's the key. Let me give you the math. Imagine 2 people, each earning $100,000 a year. Person A spends $95,000. They have a nice car, a nice apartment, nice clothes. They look successful. They save $5,000 a year. After 10 years, assuming modest returns, they have about $60,000. Not nothing, but not freedom. Person B spends $50,000. They live in a modest place, drive a reliable used car, wear comfortable clothes. They look ordinary. They save $50,000 a year. After 10 years, assuming modest returns, they have over $600,000. They have options. They have freedom. They have wealth. Same income. Completely different outcomes. The difference isn't what they earned. It's what they kept. It's the gap between their ego and their income. This is the secret. True wealth is built by the gap between your ego and your income. When your ego grows faster than your paycheck, wealth disappears. You need the car, the house, the status. So you spend everything and save nothing. You look rich. You are not. When your income grows faster than your ego, wealth accumulates. You could buy the car, but you don't need it. You could upgrade the house, but you don't care. So you save the difference. You look ordinary. You are wealthy. The person with a small ego and a growing income becomes wealthy without trying. The person with a massive ego and a stagnant income stays broke while looking rich. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can choose which person to be. Let me tell you about a real example. There's a story about a janitor who died with millions of dollars. He lived in a modest apartment, drove an old car, wore work clothes. No one knew he had money. He just saved, year after year, invested in index funds, let compounding work. When he died, he left millions to local charities. Was he rich during his life? No. He looked ordinary. Was he wealthy? Absolutely. He had more wealth than most people who looked far richer. Because wealth is what you don't see. Now think about the athletes and celebrities who earn millions and go bankrupt within years of retiring. They looked rich. They spent like they were rich. They were not wealthy. The moment the income stopped, the spending couldn't continue. The appearance collapsed. Wealth is not what you earn. It's not what you spend. It's what you keep. It's the cushion, the margin, the freedom, and it's invisible. This reframes everything about how you think about money. Stop trying to look rich. Start trying to be wealthy. The goal is not to impress strangers. The goal is to build a life that doesn't depend on impressing anyone. The goal is to have enough that you can say no. Enough that you can sleep at night. Enough that you can take risks, help others, live on your own terms. That wealth is invisible. No one will see it. No one will applaud it. You will drive your modest car past the BMW, and the driver will have no idea that you're freer than they'll ever be. That's the point. Let's get practical. How do you build invisible wealth? Step 1. Separate rich from wealthy in your mind. Every time you see someone with expensive things, remind yourself, I don't know if they're rich or wealthy. I only know they're spending. I don't know what they're keeping. This simple mental habit kills envy at the source. You're not comparing your wealth to their spending. You're comparing apples to invisible oranges. Step 2. Track your wealth, not your income. Create a net worth statement. List everything you own minus everything you owe. Update it monthly. Watch it grow. This is your real scoreboard. Not your paycheck. Not your tax return. Your net worth. The money you've kept. Step 3. Make wealth invisible by design. Automate your savings so you never see the money. Have it pulled from your paycheck before it hits your checking account. Invest it in accounts you don't check daily. Out of sight, out of mind, into wealth. The less you see it, the less you're tempted to spend it. Step 4. Define your enough in terms of wealth, not spending. Go back to your freedom number from Chapter 7. That's your wealth target. Not a car, not a house. A number that buys your autonomy. Every time you're tempted to spend, ask, does this move me toward my freedom number or away from it? The answer will guide you. Wealth is the money you didn't spend, invested where you can't see it. Say it again. Wealth is the money you didn't spend, invested where you can't see it. It's the 401k you don't check. The emergency fund you hope to never use. The brokerage account that compounds in silence. It's invisible. It's quiet. And it's the only money that truly matters. The person who understands this wins the game. Not because they have the most at the end, because they have the most freedom along the way, because they're not trapped by the need to look rich, because they're building something real, something lasting, something that no one can see and no one can take. You are the master of your own wealth. You don't need their permission to live below your means. You don't need their approval to drive an ordinary car while building an extraordinary future. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can resist the urge to perform. Let me give you a final image. Imagine two people at retirement age. The first person has a paid-off house, $1 million in investments, and a lifetime of quiet, ordinary living. They drive a modest car. They wear comfortable clothes. No one knows their net worth. They don't care. They're free. The second person has a big house with a big mortgage, a leased luxury car, and a social media feed full of impressive vacations. They look rich. They are one missed paycheck from disaster. Which one would you rather be? The answer is obvious. But living it requires discipline. It requires choosing the invisible over the visible, the real over the performed, the wealth over the rich. Your action protocol for building invisible wealth. 1. Calculate your real net worth this week. Not your income, your net worth. What you own minus what you owe. This is your starting point. Track it monthly. 2. Automate one more savings bucket. Set up an automatic transfer to an account you don't regularly see. A brokerage account, a high-yield savings, a Roth IRA. Make wealth invisible by design. 3. Conduct a rich versus wealthy audit. Look at your last month's spending. How much went to looking rich? How much went to building wealth? Be honest. Adjust accordingly. 4. Create a wealth mantra. Write down, wealth is what I don't spend. Wealth is invisible. Wealth is freedom. Put it where you'll see it daily. Let it guide your choices. This is how you win. Not by having the most toys. By having the most options. Not by looking successful. By being free. Not by being rich. By being wealthy. Now, with this distinction clear, we must confront one of the most counterintuitive lessons in all of finance. A lesson that goes against everything you've been taught about saving and spending. A lesson that might just set you free from the guilt of not having a specific goal for every dollar. Sometimes, the best reason to save money is having no reason at all. Moving to Chapter 10, Save Money for No Reason at All. And if you're ready to stop trying to look rich and start actually being wealthy, hit subscribe. It's one of those invisible investments, a small deposit of attention that compounds quietly over time. No one will see it. No one will applaud it. But you'll feel it. You'll be wealthier for it. That's the point. Next chapter is Chapter 10, Save Money for No Reason at All. Let me ask you a question that might change everything. What are you saving for? Most people have an answer. A house, retirement, a vacation, a car, a wedding, a child's education. They save with a specific goal in mind, a target date, a number to hit. And when they hit it, they stop. Or worse, they spend it and start over. This is how we're trained. Save for something. Save until you reach the goal. Then spend and repeat. It's a cycle. It's a treadmill. And it's missing the point entirely. Morgan Housel offers a different view. A radical view. A view that might just set you free from the guilt of not having a specific reason for every dollar you keep. Save money for no reason at all. Not for a house. Not for retirement. Not for anything specific. Just save. Because saving, in itself, is the goal. Because flexibility is its own reward. Because money without a purpose is freedom stored in a jar. You have a choice. Save for specific things and stop when you get them. Or save for the sake of saving and never stop building your freedom. That's the key. Let me explain why this matters. When you save for a specific goal, your savings have a job, a down payment, a retirement date, a vacation fund. That's useful. That's responsible. But it's also limiting. Because once the goal is met, the saving stops. Or worse, the saving is just a countdown to spending. You're not building wealth. You're just temporarily holding money before you release it back into the world. When you save for no reason, your savings have no job. They're just there, waiting, available, ready for anything. They're not earmarked for a house or a trip or a retirement that's decades away. They're just yours. And that's the point. Savings give you options. That's it. That's the whole philosophy. Options. Money saved without a specific purpose is freedom stored. It's the ability to quit a job you hate without having another one lined up. It's the ability to weather a crisis without panic. It's the ability to take a risk, start a business, move to a new city, go back to school, that you couldn't otherwise afford. It's the ability to say no to things that drain you and yes to things that light you up. You don't need a specific reason to have options. You just need options. And options are built one saved dollar at a time. Let me give you a real-world example. Two people, same income, same age. Person A saves for specific goals. They have a vacation fund, a car fund, a down payment fund. They hit each goal, spend the money, start over. They feel responsible. They feel on track. But when a real crisis hits, a job loss, a health issue, a family emergency, they have nothing unallocated. Their money all has jobs. There's no flexibility. There's no margin. They're one bad break from disaster. Person B saves for no reason. They just save. They don't have specific goals. They have a growing pile of money that doesn't have a job. When the crisis hits, they have options. They can weather the storm. They can take the time they need. They can say no to desperate choices. They're not one bad break from disaster. They're resilient. Who would you rather be? You can build wealth without a high income, but you cannot build wealth without a high savings rate. This is the most empowering truth in personal finance. Your income is not entirely within your control. The market determines your salary. Your boss determines your raises. The economy determines your job security. You have influence, but not control. Your savings rate? That's all you. 100% within your control. No one can force you to spend more than you earn. No one can make you save less. It is your sovereign power. The one financial decision that depends on no one but you. A high income can be lost. A high savings rate can't. The person earning $50,000 and saving 20% is building wealth. The person earning $500,000 and saving 0% is not. The income doesn't matter if the savings rate is 0. The savings rate is everything. Let me give you the math. Person A earns $200,000 a year and spends $190,000. They save $10,000. Their savings rate is 5%. After 10 years, they have about $120,000. Not nothing, but not freedom. Person B earns $60,000 a year and spends $30,000. They save $30,000. Their savings rate is 50%. After 10 years, they have about $360,000. More than 3 times what person A has on 1/3 the income. The income doesn't determine the outcome. The savings rate does. Always. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can control your savings rate. No one can take that from you. Now, let's address the psychological barrier. The guilt. The feeling that you need a reason for every dollar you keep. We're conditioned to justify saving. I'm saving for a house. I'm saving for retirement. I'm saving for my kids. These justifications feel responsible. They give our saving a purpose. They make it okay to not spend. But they also limit us. They make saving conditional. They make it something we do only until we reach a goal. They turn saving into a means to an end, rather than an end in itself. What if saving was the end? What if the goal was simply to have more options, more flexibility, more freedom? What if you didn't need a reason to save beyond the fact that saving makes your life better? This is the mindset shift. Saving is not deprivation. Saving is not sacrifice. Saving is purchasing your own future flexibility. Every dollar saved is a small piece of freedom that you will use someday, somehow, for something that matters. You don't need to know what that something is today. You just need to know that you'll be glad you have it when it arrives. Let me give you a personal example. I know someone who saved for years without a specific goal. They just saved, lived modestly, invested consistently, had no idea what the money was for, just knew they wanted options. Then their parent got sick. They needed to take 6 months off work to provide care. They could do it because they had savings. The money didn't have a job. It was just there, ready, available, freedom stored. That's the point. You don't know what the future holds. You don't know what options you'll need. But you know that having options is better than not having them. So you save. For no reason at all. For every reason that might come. Your action protocol for saving without a reason. Step 1. Calculate your savings rate, not your income. Forget what you earn. Focus on what you keep. Calculate your savings rate as a percentage of your income. If you're saving 10%, aim for 15%. If you're saving 20%, aim for 25%. The number matters less than the direction. Keep increasing your savings rate. It's the only number you fully control. Step 2. Create a no-reason account. Open a separate savings or investment account. Label it something that reminds you of its purpose. Options. Freedom. Just because. I don't know yet. Whatever resonates. Automate deposits into this account. Watch it grow. Don't assign it a job. Let it just be. Step 3. Practice saving without guilt. When you save without a specific goal, you may feel guilty. Like you're supposed to have a reason. Like you're being selfish or aimless. Push through that guilt. Remind yourself, I'm buying options. I'm building freedom. I don't need to justify that to anyone, including myself. Step 4. Test your options. Every so often, ask yourself, what could I do with this money if I needed to? Not what you will do, what you could do. Imagine the possibilities. A sabbatical, a career change, a move, a gift, a year off. This mental exercise reminds you why you're saving. It connects the dollars to the freedom they represent. You can build wealth without a high income, but you cannot build wealth without a high savings rate. Say it again. You can build wealth without a high income, but you cannot build wealth without a high savings rate. Your income is not the driver. Your savings rate is. and your savings rate is entirely within your control. This is liberating. It means you don't have to wait for a raise to start building wealth. You don't have to earn more to have more. You just have to keep more of what you already have. You have to spend less than you earn consistently for a long time, for no reason other than that it gives you options. The person who masters this wins. Not because they have the most money at the end, because they have the most choices along the way, because they're not dependent on a job, a market, an economy, because they've built a cushion that lets them sleep at night and take risks that others can't. You are the master of your own savings rate. You don't need their permission to spend less. You don't need their approval to live below your means. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can choose to save, not for a thing, but for the freedom that comes from having options. Let me give you a final thought. Imagine two people at the end of their lives. One person spent their whole career saving for specific things. They hit every goal. They bought the house, took the vacations, retired on schedule. They did everything right. But when crises came, and they always come, they had no margin. They made desperate choices. They said yes to things they should have said no to. They lived their life with no cushion, no flexibility, no options. The other person saved for no reason. They just saved. They lived below their means, consistently, for decades. They didn't have a specific plan for the money. They just knew they wanted options. When crises came, they had margin. They could say no. They could wait. They could choose. They lived their life with a cushion, with flexibility, with options. Who lived better? The one with the plan? Or the one with the options? Options are the point. Options are freedom. Options are what money is really for. Your final action for this chapter, and for your financial life. Save. For no reason at all. And let the options accumulate. Now, with this mindset installed, we must confront one of the most seductive traps in all of finance. A trap that sounds smart, sounds sophisticated, but leads countless investors to ruin. The trap of believing you can predict the future. We must talk about the role of surprise. Moving to Chapter 11, Surprise. The role of the unexpected. And if you're ready to start saving for no reason and building options you can't yet imagine, hit subscribe. Consider it a deposit in your mental options account. No specific purpose. Just accumulating perspective that might come in handy someday when you least expect it. You don't need a reason to get smarter. You just need to start. It's time for the Chapter 11. Reasonable is greater than rational. Let me tell you about the perfect financial plan. It's mathematically optimal. It maximizes every dollar. It buys low and sells high. It never panics. It never chases. It's perfectly rational, all the time, forever. It also doesn't exist. Not for you. Not for anyone. Because you're human. In an ideal world, we'd all be perfectly rational investors. We'd have no emotions, no fear, no greed. We'd make decisions based purely on data, and we'd execute them flawlessly. We'd be rich. But we're not in an ideal world. We're in this world. The world where markets crash and you feel panic in your chest. The world where your friends get rich on something you passed on and you feel envy burning. The world where the perfectly rational decision to stay invested during a downturn feels utterly impossible when you're watching your life savings evaporate. You have a choice. Chase the perfectly rational plan that you'll abandon the first time it gets hard. Or embrace a reasonable plan that you can actually stick with for 30 years. That's the key. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the sustainable. This is the lesson. The mathematically optimal strategy is worthless if you can't follow it. The perfectly diversified portfolio doesn't help if you sell in a panic. The highest return investment doesn't matter if you can't sleep at night. Better to be reasonable than rational. Let me explain what this means. Rational means doing what the math says. Ignoring emotion. Making decisions based purely on logic and probability. In theory, this is optimal. In practice, it's impossible for most humans over long periods. Reasonable means doing what you can actually sustain. It means acknowledging your emotions and working with them, not against them. It means making decisions that let you sleep, even if they're not mathematically perfect. It means choosing a plan you can follow for decades, not one you'll abandon in months. The difference is everything. Let me give you an example. The mortgage. The mathematically rational move is to keep your mortgage as long as possible if your investment returns are higher than your interest rate. Don't pay it off early. Invest the extra money. Let compounding work. The math says this is optimal. But for many people, a paid-off mortgage is peace. It's security. It's knowing that no matter what happens, you have a roof over your head. It's sleeping at night when the market crashes. Is paying off your mortgage early rational? No. The math says invest instead. Is it reasonable? Absolutely. If it helps you sleep, if it keeps you in the game, if it prevents you from making panic decisions later, it's the right move for you. Reasonable is greater than rational. Another example. Index funds. The mathematically rational portfolio might include a small allocation to emerging markets, or value stocks, or complicated factor tilts. These have historically added a tiny bit of return over long periods. The math says include them. But if that complexity makes you anxious, if you don't understand it, if you're tempted to tinker and adjust and second guess, then skip it. Buy a simple S&P 500 index fund. Hold it forever. Is it perfectly optimal? No. Is it reasonable? Yes. It's simple. It's understandable. It's sustainable. You'll stick with it for 30 years. That beats a slightly higher return that you abandon after one bad year. This is the philosophy. The best financial plan is the one you can actually follow, not the one with the highest theoretical return. The one you'll actually execute, year after year, through bull markets and bear markets, through fear and greed, through life. You are strong. You are intelligent. You know yourself. You know what you can sustain. Let me give you a real-world example from Morgan Housel himself. He admits he doesn't follow all his own advice. He has a paid-off mortgage even though the math says invest. Why? Because it lets him sleep. Because his personal psychology matters more than theoretical optimization. Because he's human. This is permission. Permission to be human. Permission to prioritize peace over perfection. Permission to make reasonable choices even when they're not perfectly rational. The financial industry sells optimization. They want you to believe that every basis point matters, that every decision should be mathematically perfect, that any deviation from optimal is a mistake. This is how they sell products. This is how they create complexity. This is how they make you feel inadequate. The truth is simpler. A reasonable plan, followed consistently for decades, will beat a perfect plan abandoned after 1 year. Every time. Not in theory. In reality. Let me give you the math. Imagine two investors. Investor A has a perfectly rational plan. They've optimized everything. They rebalance quarterly. They tax loss harvest. They tilt to small cap value. They're sophisticated. But in the 2008 crash, they panic. They sell at the bottom. They miss the recovery. Their lifetime returns are mediocre. Investor B has a simple, reasonable plan. They buy an S&P 500 index fund every month, automatically, no matter what. They don't optimize. They don't rebalance. They just keep buying. In 2008, they keep buying. The market drops, they keep buying. The market recovers, they're still buying. 30 years later, they're wealthy. Who wins? Investor B. Not because their plan was better, because they stuck with it. Because it was reasonable enough to sustain. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the sustainable. Say it again. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the sustainable. The perfect plan you abandon is worthless. The sustainable plan you follow is priceless. This applies to more than investing. It applies to everything. Diet. The perfect diet is the one you can't stick with. The reasonable diet, the one you can actually follow, most days, for years, that's the one that transforms your health. Exercise. The perfect workout routine is the one you quit after 3 weeks. The reasonable routine, the one you actually do, consistently, for decades, that's the one that builds a healthy body. Relationships. The perfect partner doesn't exist. The reasonable partner, the one you can actually love through all their flaws for a lifetime, that's the one who builds a real marriage. Career. The perfect job is a myth. The reasonable job, the one that pays enough, challenges enough, lets you live, that's the one that builds a career. The pattern is everywhere. Perfection is the enemy of sustainability. Sustainability is the only path to success. Your action protocol for choosing reasonable over rational. Step 1. Audit your current plan. Look at your financial plan. Is it sustainable? Can you really follow it for 30 years? Or is it optimized to the point of anxiety? Are you constantly second-guessing? Are you checking your portfolio too often? Are you tempted to tinker? If the answer is yes, your plan is too complex. Simplify. Step 2. Identify your sleep at night factors. What actually lets you sleep? A paid-off mortgage? More cash? A simpler portfolio? Less checking? Identify the things that give you peace, even if they're not mathematically optimal. Then build them into your plan. Your psychology matters more than optimization. Step 3. Create a good enough portfolio. Design a portfolio that's simple enough to understand and sustainable enough to hold forever. 3 funds max. An S&P 500 index. A total bond market. Maybe an international. That's it. Automate contributions. Check once a year. Let it ride. It won't be perfect. It will be good enough. Good enough for 30 years beats perfect for one. Step 4. Give yourself permission. You have permission. Permission to be human. Permission to make reasonable choices. Permission to prioritize peace over perfection. You don't need their approval to build a plan that works for you. You don't need the financial industry's permission to be simple. You are the master of your own financial life. The best financial plan is the one you can actually follow, not the one with the highest returns. The one you'll actually follow. The one you can sustain through bull markets and bear markets, through fear and greed, through life. That plan exists. It's probably simpler than you think. It's probably more reasonable than rational. And it's the only plan that will actually make you wealthy. Let me give you a final image. Imagine 2 people at retirement. One spent their whole life chasing the perfect plan. They optimized, tweaked, adjusted. They read every book, followed every expert, tried every strategy. They were anxious all the time. They never felt secure. And in the end, their returns were fine, but they never enjoyed the journey. The other had a simple, reasonable plan. They saved automatically. They invested in index funds. They checked once a year. They slept at night. They enjoyed their life. And in the end, their returns were also fine. Maybe a little less than the optimizers. But they had 30 years of peace along the way. Who won? The one with peace. The one with sustainability. The one who didn't let perfect be the enemy of good. You can be that person. You can choose reasonable over rational. You can build a plan you can actually follow. You can sleep at night. And you can still build wealth. Reasonable is greater than rational. Write it down. Remember it. Live it. Your final action for this chapter. Simplify one thing this week. One complexity in your financial life that causes anxiety. One account you check too often. One strategy you don't fully understand. Simplify it. Make it reasonable. Make it sustainable. Let yourself sleep. Now, with this philosophy installed, we must confront one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. A force that has destroyed more wealth than any market crash. A force that sounds smart, sounds sophisticated, but is actually a trap. The seduction of pessimism. Moving to Chapter 12, the seduction of pessimism. And if you're ready to choose reasonable over rational and build a plan you can actually follow, hit subscribe. It's one of those reasonable choices, not perfect, not optimal, but sustainable. A small deposit of perspective that compounds over time. You'll stick with it because it's simple. You'll be wealthier because you stuck with it. That's the point. Our next chapter is Chapter 12, Surprise. The role of the unexpected. Let me tell you about the most dangerous phrase in investing. This time is different. You've heard it. Every bubble, every crash, every mania is accompanied by someone declaring that the old rules no longer apply. That we've entered a new era. That history is irrelevant. That this time, it's different. It's almost never different. Human nature doesn't change. Greed and fear are constant. Bubbles inflate and pop. Markets crash and recover. The more things change, the more they stay the same. But here's the paradox. While human nature is predictable, the specific events that trigger it are not. The future is not a straight line from the past. It's a series of surprises. Things that have never happened before, happening all the time. Things that have never happened before, happen all the time. Morgan Housel says this, and it's one of the most important sentences in the entire book. Let it sink in. Things that have never happened before, happen all the time. The 2008 financial crisis had never occurred exactly that way. Subprime mortgages, complex derivatives, interconnected global banks. The specific cocktail was unprecedented. Yet it happened. The 2020 pandemic was unprecedented. The last global pandemic of that scale was a century earlier. The economic shutdown, the government response, the market crash and recovery, none of it had happened before in our lifetimes. Yet it happened. The dot-com bubble, the housing crash, the rise of cryptocurrency, the meme stock phenomenon, all unprecedented. All happened anyway. This is the nature of reality. History is not a roadmap. It's a collection of stories about things that already happened. The future will bring things that have never happened. Guaranteed. You have a choice. Assume you can predict the future and be crushed when you're wrong. Or accept that you can't and build a life that can handle whatever comes. That's the key. Let's look at why this matters for your money. Most financial planning is based on history. We look at past market returns and assume the future will be similar. We study past crises and assume we'll recognize the next one. We build models based on what's already happened. This is useful. It's not useless, but it's incomplete. Because the next crisis won't look like the last one. The next boom won't look like the previous boom. The future will bring surprises that none of your models anticipated. This is not pessimism. It's realism. It's acknowledging that you are not a fortune teller. Neither is anyone else. The experts who predicted the last crisis are no better at predicting the next one. They just got lucky once. The only certainty is uncertainty. Say it again. The only certainty is uncertainty. You don't know what's coming. Neither do I. Neither does anyone. The sooner you accept this, the sooner you can stop trying to predict and start preparing. Let me give you a real-world example. In 2007, virtually no one predicted the housing crash. A few did, and they became famous. But the vast majority of economists, investors, and policymakers were caught completely off guard. Not because they were stupid, because the specific chain of events had never happened before. They were surprised. In 2019, virtually no one predicted a global pandemic. A few had written about the possibility, but no one knew when, where, or how. The world shut down. Markets crashed. Lives changed. Surprise. In 2021, virtually no one predicted 40-year high inflation. Central banks said it was transitory. They were wrong. Surprise. The pattern is clear. You will be surprised. Again and again. The only question is whether you'll be prepared. This requires a specific mindset. Humility. Intellectual humility. The recognition that you don't know what you don't know. The willingness to say, I don't know, and mean it. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can handle uncertainty. You don't need to know the future to be ready for it. So how do you prepare for surprises? Not by predicting them, by building resilience. Step 1. Build margin. Margin is the gap between what you have and what you need. It's cash in the bank. It's low expenses. It's a diversified portfolio. It's skills that can earn income in a downturn. Margin means that when the surprise comes, and it will, you have room to breathe. You don't have to make desperate decisions. You can wait. You can think. You can adapt. Calculate your margin. If you lost your job tomorrow, how long could you survive? If the market dropped 50%, would you be forced to sell? If an unexpected expense appeared, could you cover it? The answers tell you how much margin you have. If it's not enough, your priority is building more. Step 2. Embrace flexibility. Rigid plans break under surprise. Flexible plans bend and survive. This applies to everything. Investments. Don't put all your money in one asset class. Diversify. Own stocks and bonds. Own domestic and international. Own some cash. You don't know which will perform best. Own them all. Career. Don't specialize so narrowly that you can't adapt. Develop multiple skills. Keep learning. Stay relevant. If your industry changes, you'll be ready. Lifestyle. Don't take on fixed expenses that you can't reduce. Avoid massive debt. Keep your overhead low. If your income drops, you can adjust. Flexibility is freedom. The more flexible you are, the less any single surprise can hurt you. Step 3. Expect to be wrong. Your forecasts will be wrong. Your plans will need to change. Your assumptions will be challenged. This is not failure. This is life. The key is to build that expectation into your psychology. When you make a forecast, hold it lightly. When you create a plan, build in room for adjustment. When you're wrong, don't beat yourself up. Just adapt. The most dangerous investors are the ones who are certain. They're sure the market will go up, so they leverage to the max. They're sure a stock will double, so they bet everything. They're sure they know what's coming. They're always surprised, and they're always destroyed. The safest investors are the ones who know they don't know. They build margin. They diversify. They stay humble. They're prepared for whatever comes. They're rarely destroyed. The only certainty is uncertainty. Say it one more time. The only certainty is uncertainty. Let it be your mantra. Let it guide your decisions. Let it keep you humble and prepared. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you're building a house. You can study every past hurricane. You can analyze historical weather patterns. You can model the most likely storms. But you can't predict the exact hurricane that will hit your house. So what do? You build a strong foundation. You use quality materials. You put on a sturdy roof. You prepare for the worst, even though you don't know what the worst will be. Your financial life is the same. You can't predict the next crisis, but you can build a strong foundation. Low debt, high savings, diversified investments, flexible skills, margin. You prepare for the worst, even though you don't know what the worst will be. This is not pessimism. It's prudence. It's the recognition that the world is unpredictable and the only rational response is resilience. Your action protocol for embracing surprise. Step 1. Conduct a what-if audit. Sit down and ask, what if the worst happened? Not to be morbid, to be prepared. What if you lost your job? What if the market crashed 50%? What if you had a major health emergency? What if inflation stayed high for years? For each scenario, ask, could I survive? What would I do? The answers will show you where your margin is thin. Step 2. Build one margin layer this month. Pick one area where your margin is insufficient. Maybe you need a larger emergency fund. Maybe you need to reduce a fixed expense. Maybe you need to diversify your investments. Take one action this month to build that margin, one step at a time. Step 3. Practice intellectual humility. For the next 30 days, whenever you're tempted to make a confident prediction about the future, stop. Say instead, I don't know. No one knows. But here's how I'm prepared. Train yourself to hold forecasts lightly and focus on preparation instead. Step 4. Create a surprise journal. Write down the surprises you've already experienced, the things you didn't see coming, the crises you survived, the unexpected opportunities that changed your life. This journal is evidence. Evidence that you've handled surprises before. Evidence that you can handle them again. Evidence that uncertainty is not something to fear, but something to prepare for. Things that have never happened before happen all the time. This is not a warning. It's an invitation. An invitation to stop trying to predict the unpredictable and start building a life that can handle anything. An invitation to humility. An invitation to resilience. An invitation to freedom. The person who accepts uncertainty is free. Free from the anxiety of trying to know the unknowable. Free from the panic of being surprised. Free to focus on what they can control, their savings, their skills, their margin, their response. You can be that person. You can accept that you don't know what's coming. And you can prepare anyway. Not because you're afraid, because you're smart. The only certainty is uncertainty. Let it be your guide. Let it shape your decisions. Let it set you free. Now, with this humility installed, we must confront one final lesson. A lesson about time, about change, about the person you'll become. Because the biggest surprise of all might be you. Moving to Chapter 13, you'll change, and your plan should too. And if you're ready to embrace uncertainty and build a life that can handle any surprise, hit subscribe. It's one of those small, flexible choices, a deposit of perspective that adapts as you do. You don't know what you'll need to know in the future, but you know that having more perspectives is better than having fewer. That's margin for your mind. Build it. Next chapter is Chapter 13, Room for Error, the Margin of Safety. Let me tell you about the only guarantee you can actually buy. Not a warranty, not insurance, not a government bond. Something better. Something called margin of safety. Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing, coined the term. He meant it as an investing concept. Buy stocks for less than they're worth. So even if you're wrong, you're protected. But the idea is bigger than investing. It's a philosophy for life. Margin of safety means planning on your plan, not going according to plan. It means building a bridge that can hold 10 times the weight it will ever carry. It means packing extra food for a hike, even if you're sure you'll be back by dinner. It means keeping cash in the bank, even if you're certain your job is secure. It means leaving room for error, because error is guaranteed. Room for error is the only guarantee you can buy. You cannot guarantee that your investments will go up. You cannot guarantee that your job will last. You cannot guarantee that your health will hold. You cannot guarantee that the economy will cooperate. You cannot guarantee any of it. But you can guarantee that you'll survive when things go wrong. You can guarantee that a single bad day won't wipe you out. You can guarantee that you'll have time to recover, to adapt, to try again. You buy that guarantee with margin, with room for error, with a cushion that catches you when you fall. You have a choice. Live on the edge, with no margin, and hope nothing goes wrong. Or build a cushion with room for error and know that you'll be fine even when it does. That's the key. Let me explain why this matters so much. Most financial planning is based on optimism. We assume our jobs will continue. We assume our investments will grow. We assume our health will hold. We assume the economy will cooperate. We build our plans on these assumptions, and then we're shocked when they fail. This is not planning. This is hoping. And hope is not a strategy. Margin of safety is the opposite. It starts with the assumption that things will go wrong. Not because you're pessimistic, because you're realistic, because you know that life is unpredictable, because you've seen it happen to others and you know it can happen to you. The question is not if things will go wrong. The question is when. And the only answer that matters is, when they do, will you survive? Let me give you an example. Imagine two bridges. One is built to exactly the maximum weight it will ever carry. The engineers calculate the heaviest truck, add a small buffer, and build to that spec. The bridge is efficient. It uses the minimum materials. It's perfectly optimized. The other bridge is built to carry 10 times the maximum expected weight. It's over-engineered. It uses far more materials than necessary. It's inefficient. It's costly. Which bridge do you want to drive over? The second one. Every time. Because you know that calculations can be wrong. Because you know that unexpected loads can appear. Because you know that materials can degrade. Because you know that safety matters more than efficiency. Your financial life is the same. You can optimize for efficiency with no margin and hope nothing goes wrong. Or you can over-engineer with room for error and know that you'll survive when it does. Room for error is the only guarantee you can buy. Let's get specific. What does margin of safety look like in practice? Cash. Cash in the bank is margin. It's money that's not at risk. It's there for emergencies, for opportunities, for peace of mind. How much? Enough that you don't lose sleep. Enough that a market crash doesn't force you to sell. Enough that a job loss doesn't mean immediate disaster. 3 months of expenses? 6 months? A year? More? The right answer is the amount that lets you sleep. Low debt. Debt is the opposite of margin. It's a fixed obligation that must be paid regardless of circumstances. The less debt you have, the more margin you have. A paid-off mortgage is margin. A car loan is not. Credit card debt is margin negative. Every dollar of debt reduces your room for error. Diversification. Putting all your money in one stock is the absence of margin. One bad day and you're wiped out. Owning hundreds of stocks across different sectors and countries is margin. If one fails, the others keep you afloat. Conservative assumptions. When you plan, use conservative numbers. Assume lower returns than history suggests. Assume higher expenses than you expect. Assume you'll need more time than you think. If you're wrong on the conservative side, you'll have extra. If you're wrong on the optimistic side, you'll be short. Build your plans on the conservative side. Multiple income streams. Relying on one job is risky. That job could disappear. Building multiple income streams, side hustles, investments, skills that can earn, is margin. If one stream dries up, others keep flowing. Health. Your body is your most important asset. Neglecting it is the ultimate absence of margin. One health crisis can destroy everything. Exercise, sleep, nutrition, these are margin for your life. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can build margin in every area of your life. Let me tell you a story. There's a famous investor who was asked about his success. He said, "I've made a lot of money by being consistently wrong." People were confused. How can you make money by being wrong? His explanation, he always built margin into his investments. He bought companies for less than they were worth. He kept cash on hand. He diversified. He was wrong about many things. His predictions failed. His timing was off. His analysis was flawed. But because he had margin, none of those mistakes destroyed him. He survived to be right another day. This is the power of margin. It doesn't make you right. It makes you durable. It lets you survive your mistakes long enough to learn from them. It lets you stay in the game when others are forced out. Room for error is the only guarantee you can buy. Say it again. Room for error is the only guarantee you can buy. Not a guarantee that you'll be right. A guarantee that you'll survive being wrong. Now, let's address the psychological barrier. The feeling that margin is inefficient. That cash is losing value to inflation. That low returns are a waste. That you should be fully invested, fully leveraged, fully optimized. This is the voice of greed. The voice that says you can predict the future. The the voice that ignores risk, the voice that will destroy you. Margin is not inefficient. Margin is insurance. You don't buy insurance because you expect to crash your car. You buy it because you might. And the cost of insurance is worth the peace of mind. Cash in the bank is the same. You don't hold it because you expect to need it. You hold it because you might. And the cost of holding it, the foregone returns, is worth the guarantee that you'll survive when things go wrong. How much margin is enough? There's no single answer. It depends on your situation, your risk tolerance, your psychology. But here's a rule of thumb. Enough that a single bad day doesn't wipe you out. Enough that you can sleep at night. Enough that you're not forced to sell at the worst possible moment. For some, that's 3 months of expenses. For others, it's 2 years. For some, it's a paid-off house. For others, it's a diversified portfolio. The number doesn't matter as much as the feeling. The feeling of safety. The feeling of durability. The feeling that you can handle whatever comes. You are the master of your own margin. You decide how much is enough. You don't need their permission to be safe. Your action protocol for building margin. Step 1. Calculate your current margin. What's your cushion? How many months could you survive without income? How much cash do you have relative to your expenses? How diversified are your income streams? How much debt do you carry? Get the numbers. See where you stand. Step 2. Identify your biggest risk. What single event could wipe you out? Job loss? Market crash? Health crisis? Divorce? Be honest. Then ask, do I have margin against that risk? If not, that's your priority. Step 3. Add 1 layer of margin this month. Pick one area where your margin is thin. Add to your emergency fund. Pay down a debt. Diversify one investment. Develop one new skill. Start one side hustle. One action. This month. Build margin 1 layer at a time. Step 4. Test your sleep. Ask yourself honestly, do I sleep at night? If the answer is no, you need more margin. Keep adding until you sleep. Sleep is the ultimate test. If you're not sleeping, your margin is insufficient. No amount of potential return is worth losing sleep. Room for error is the only guarantee you can buy. This is the truth. You cannot guarantee returns. You cannot guarantee outcomes. You cannot guarantee that your plans will work. But you can guarantee that you'll survive when they don't. You buy that guarantee with margin. The person with margin is free. Free from panic. Free from desperation. Free from forced decisions. Free to wait, to think, to choose. The person without margin is a slave to circumstance. One bad day and they're done. Choose to be free. Build margin. Buy the only guarantee that exists. Now, with margin built into your life, we must confront one final, profound lesson. A lesson about time, about change, about the person you'll become. Because the biggest surprise of all might be you. Moving to chapter 14, you'll change, and your plan should too. And if you're ready to build margin into your life, and buy the only guarantee that exists, hit subscribe. It's one of those margin-building choices, a small deposit of perspective that costs you nothing but adds to your cushion. You don't know what you'll need to know in the future, but you know that having more knowledge is better than having less. That's margin for your mind. Build it. Next chapter in line is chapter 14. That is, you'll change, and your plan should too. Let me ask you a question that might be uncomfortable. Who were you 10 years ago? What did you want? What did you care about? What did you think would make you happy? What did you think you'd be doing today? Now look at yourself now. Are you the same person? Do you want the same things? Do you care about the same stuff? Are you living the life that 25-year-old you imagined? Probably not. And that's the point. People dramatically underestimate how much they will change in the future. We look back at our past selves and see how much we've evolved. Then we look forward and assume we'll stay exactly as we are. It's a cognitive bias. Psychologists call it the end of history illusion. We believe that history has ended and we've finally arrived at our final form. We're wrong. We'll keep changing. And our financial plans need to account for that. Don't let your past self trap your future self. This is the lesson. The decisions you make today create the boundaries your future self will live inside. Make them too rigid, too extreme, too permanent, and you may find that the person you become is trapped by the choices of a person who no longer exists. You have a choice. Lock yourself into a life that might not fit who you become. Or build flexibility. Leave room to pivot and let your future self thank you. That's the key. Let me give you some examples. At 25, you might want a high-powered career, 60-hour weeks, constant travel, maximum income, You optimize your life for that. Expensive city, high-stress lifestyle, minimal savings because you'll make it up later. At 45, you might want something different. Time with family, meaningful work, peace. But your life is optimized for the 25-year-old you. The expensive city requires a high income. The high-stress lifestyle is exhausting. You're trapped. You can't change because your past self built a cage. At 30, you might want a huge house. Status, space for parties. You stretch to afford it. Big mortgage, high maintenance. All your money goes to the house. At 50, you might want simplicity. Less to clean, less to maintain, less cost. But you can't sell without a loss. You can't downsize without a tax hit. You're trapped in a house that no longer fits, built by a person who no longer exists. At 20, you might invest aggressively. All stocks, maximum risk. You're young, you can handle it. At 60, you might want safety, preservation, peace. But if the market crashes the year before you retire, you're forced to sell at the bottom. Your past self's risk tolerance traps your future self in a bad outcome. These are not hypotheticals. These are happening every day. People locked into lives, houses, careers, and financial plans that no longer fit because they didn't leave room for change. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can avoid this trap. The solution is not to avoid planning. It's to plan with flexibility. It's to build a life that can adapt as you change. This is why moderation matters. Extremes are brittle. All or nothing bets are dangerous. The person who goes all in on one career, one city, one house, one investment, they have no room to pivot. When they change, they break. Moderation is flexible. A balanced life, financially, emotionally, physically, can adapt. You can shift careers if you've kept your skills current and your expenses low. You can move cities if you haven't overinvested in a house. You can change your lifestyle if you haven't locked yourself into massive fixed costs. The goal is not to predict the future. You can't. The goal is to be ready for whatever comes. To build a life that can bend without breaking. To leave room for the person you're becoming. Let me give you a real-world example from finance. Imagine two investors. One goes all in on a single stock. They're convinced it's the next big thing. They put everything in it. For a while, it works. They feel brilliant. But then they change. They get older. They get married. They have kids. Their risk tolerance shifts. They want safety, but they're still all in on that one stock. They can't get out without a huge tax bill. They're trapped. Their past self's conviction traps their future self's need for safety. The other investor diversifies. They own many stocks. They have some bonds. They keep some cash. They're not optimized for maximum returns, but they're flexible. When they change, when their needs shift, they can adjust. Sell some stocks, buy more bonds. No tax disaster. No forced decisions. They adapt. Who's better off? The one who left room for change. This applies to every area of life. Career. Don't specialize so narrowly that you can't pivot. Develop skills that transfer. Keep learning. Stay curious. The career you want at 25 might not exist at 45. Be ready. Location. Don't buy a house that's so specific, so customized, so expensive that you can't move. Rent for longer than you think. Keep your options open. The city you love at 30 might feel like a trap at 50. Lifestyle. Don't let your fixed costs creep up so high that you can't adjust. Keep your overhead low. Live below your means. The lifestyle you crave in your 30s might exhaust you in your 50s. Leave room to simplify. Relationships. Don't burn bridges. Don't make permanent decisions based on temporary feelings. People change. You change. Leave room for reconciliation, for growth, for forgiveness. Identity. Don't lock yourself into a rigid idea of who you are. I'm not a morning person. I'm bad with money. I'm not creative. These labels become cages. Leave room to become someone new. Don't let your past self trap your future self. Say it again. Don't let your past self trap your future self. The decisions you make today create the boundaries your future self will live inside. Make them flexible. Make them forgiving. Make them leave room for change. Let me give you a personal example from Morgan Housel. He writes that he used to think he wanted to retire early. Now he's not so sure. He enjoys his work. He might want to work for decades. His financial plan accounts for both possibilities. He saves enough to retire early if he wants, but he also builds a career he might want to continue. He leaves room for change. This is wisdom, not knowing the future, preparing for multiple futures. Building a life that works whether you want to retire at 50 or work until 70. Whether you want to stay in the same city or move. Whether you want the same career or something new. How do you build this kind of flexibility? Step 1. Avoid extreme, irreversible commitments. Before any major decision, ask, how hard would it be to undo this? If the answer is very hard, think twice. A huge mortgage, a career-ending move, a life-changing purchase. These are commitments that trap your future self. Make them sparingly. Step 2. Keep your fixed costs low. The lower your fixed costs, the more flexibility you have. Rent instead of buy when you're uncertain. Keep your lifestyle modest. Avoid debt that requires ongoing payments. The less you have to spend, the more you can choose. Step 3. Build optionality. Optionality means having choices. Multiple skills, multiple income streams, multiple relationships, multiple places you could live. The more options you have, the less trapped you are. Invest in optionality. It's the ultimate hedge against change. Step 4. Revisit your plan regularly. Your plan should evolve as you do. Review it annually. Ask, am I still the person who made this plan? Does it still fit who I'm becoming? If the answer is no, adjust. Don't cling to a plan that no longer serves you just because it's what you once wanted. Step 5. Give your future self room. When you make decisions, imagine your future self. Not the person you are today. The person you might become in 10, 20, 30 years. What would they want? What would they need? Leave them room. Be kind to the person you haven't met yet. Don't let your past self trap your future self. This is the golden rule of financial planning. Treat your future self the way you'd want to be treated. Give them options. Give them flexibility. Give them room to be someone new. The person you become will thank the person you are. Not for being right about the future. For being humble enough to admit you didn't know. For being wise enough to leave room. For being kind enough to care about someone you've never met. Yourself. Years from now. You are the master of your own world. Not just today's world. The world of your future self too. Build it with care. Build it with flexibility. Build it with love for the person you're becoming. Your action protocol for embracing change. Step 1. Write a letter to your future self. Sit down and write a letter to yourself 10 years from now. What do you want for them? What do you hope they have? What do you hope they're free from? Then read it. This is your guide. This is what you're building toward. Step 2. Audit your commitments. Look at your major commitments. Housing, career, debt, relationships. Ask, how flexible is this? How hard would it be to change? Identify the ones that feel like cages. Start planning how to make them more flexible. Step 3. Create a change fund. Set aside money specifically for future flexibility. Not retirement, not a house, just money that gives your future self options. A fund for a career change, a move, a sabbatical, a new direction. Money with no specific purpose except to let your future self choose. Step 4. Practice revisiting. Every year, on your birthday or New Year's Day, revisit your plan. Ask the hard questions. Am I still the person who made this? Does this still fit? What would my future self want? Then adjust. Make change a regular part of your process. Don't let your past self trap your future self. This is the lesson. You will change. Embrace it. Plan for it. Leave room for the person you're becoming. They're counting on you. Now, with this wisdom about change, we arrive at the final chapter. The culmination of everything. The summary of all the lessons. The place where it all comes together. Moving to chapter 15, the seduction of pessimism. And if you're ready to leave room for your future self and build a life that can adapt, hit subscribe. It's one of those flexible choices, a small deposit of perspective that will still be valuable no matter who you become. You don't know what you'll need to know, but you know that having more wisdom is better than having less. That's optionality for your mind. Build it. It's time for chapter 15. Nothing's free, the price of admission. Let me tell you about the most expensive mistake in finance. It's not picking the wrong stock. It's not selling at the bottom. It's not buying at the top. It's something deeper. Something almost everyone does without realizing it. Treating the price of admission as a fine. In finance, everything has a price. Volatility is the price of returns. Uncertainty is the price of opportunity. Risk is the price of reward. Drawdowns are the price of growth. These are not penalties. They are not mistakes. They are not things to be avoided. They are the entrance fee. You want market returns? You must pay market volatility. You cannot have one without the other. They are the same thing. The roller coaster doesn't go up without coming down. The ride doesn't exist without the drops. But most people treat volatility like a fine. They see the market drop and think, I'm being punished. I did something wrong. I need to avoid this. So they sell. They lock in the loss. They miss the recovery. They pay the fine and miss the reward. They didn't understand the transaction. The fee is mandatory. The returns are not. You have a choice. Pay the fee and get the returns. Or refuse to pay and get nothing. That's the only choice. You cannot avoid the fee and still get the reward. That's not how it works. That's the key. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine you want to go to a concert. Your favorite band is playing. Tickets are $100. You pay the $100, you get the concert. That's the transaction. The $100 is the price. The concert is the reward. Now imagine you show up at the door and say, I don't want to pay $100. That's too expensive. I'll just stand here and listen from outside. You might hear a few notes. You might catch a glimpse. But you're not getting the concert. You're getting scraps. You didn't pay the price. This is obvious. No one argues with it. You want the concert, you pay the ticket price. But with investing, people argue constantly. They want the returns without the volatility. They want the growth without the risk. They want the reward without the price. They stand outside the venue, complaining that they can't hear, refusing to pay the only price that grants admission. Volatility is not a fine. It's the ticket price. You don't get the returns without it. Let me give you a real-world example. The S&P 500 has returned about 10% annually over the long term. But along the way, it has dropped by 10% or more about once every 2 years. It has dropped by 20% or more about once every 6 years. It has dropped by 30% or more about once every 15 years. These are not bugs. They are features. They are the price of admission. If you want the 10% returns, you must pay the 30% drawdowns. They come in the same package. You don't get to pick and choose. You buy the whole ride, or you don't ride at all. The people who succeed are the ones who understand this. They don't panic when the market drops. They don't think they're being punished. They know they're just paying the price. They've already accepted it. They stay seated. The ride continues. They get the returns. The people who fail are the ones who refuse to pay. They sell at the bottom. They miss the recovery. They pay the price and get nothing. They stood in line, bought the ticket, and then ran out screaming on the first drop. The fee is mandatory. The returns are not. This applies to more than investing. It applies to everything worth having. Business. You want to build a successful company? The price is stress, uncertainty, long hours, sleepless nights, and a high probability of failure. That's the ticket price. You don't get the reward without paying it. If you're not willing to pay, don't start. Career. You want to reach the top of your field? The price is years of grinding, rejection, learning, and delayed gratification. That's the ticket price. You don't get the corner office without paying it. If you're not willing to pay, stay where you are. Relationships. You want a deep, lasting partnership? The price is vulnerability, conflict, compromise, and the risk of loss. That's the ticket price. You don't get the connection without paying it. If you're not willing to pay, stay single. Health. You want to be fit and strong? The price is discipline, sweat, sore muscles, and saying no to things you want. That's the ticket price. You don't get the body without paying it. If you're not willing to pay, accept the alternative. Freedom. You want to control your own time? The price is saving aggressively, living below your means, and delaying gratification for years. That's the ticket price. You don't get the freedom without paying it. If you're not willing to pay, keep working. Everything has a price. The only question is, are you willing to pay it? You are strong. You are intelligent. You can decide what you're willing to pay. But you cannot decide to avoid the price and still get the reward. That's not an option. Let me give you a framework. Before you pursue any goal, ask yourself, am I willing to pay the price? Not can I avoid the price? Not is there a cheaper way? Not can I get this for free? Just, am I willing to pay? If the answer is yes, then proceed. Accept the price. Don't complain when it comes due. Don't act surprised when the market drops. Don't panic when things get hard. You knew this was coming. You agreed to pay. If the answer is no, then don't pursue the goal. It's that simple. Don't stand outside the concert complaining that you can't hear. Don't buy the ticket and then run away screaming. Either pay or don't. But don't pretend you can have it both ways. Let me give you a real-world example from Morgan Housel. He writes about the difference between price and fine. When you pay a price, you're getting something in return. When you pay a fine, you're just being punished. The key is to reframe volatility as a price, not a fine. When the market drops 20%, most people feel fined. They feel punished. They think something went wrong. They want to avoid it. But if you reframe it as a price, everything changes. You're not being punished. You're just paying the ticket. This is what it costs to get the returns. You accept it. You stay invested. You get the returns. The reframe changes everything. Think about a farmer. They plant seeds. They wait. They hope for rain. They hope for sun. They know that some years will be bad. Some years will be good. They don't call a drought a fine. They call it the price of farming. They accept it. They keep farming. You are the farmer of your own wealth. Volatility is the drought. Uncertainty is the weather. You can't control it. You can only accept it as the price of admission and keep planting. The fee is mandatory. The returns are not. Say it again. The fee is mandatory. The returns are not. You cannot avoid the fee. You can only decide whether to pay it and get the returns, or avoid it and get nothing. This reframe will save you years of anxiety. It will keep you invested when others panic. It will keep you working when others quit. It will keep you in the game long enough to win. Your action protocol for accepting the price. Step 1. Identify your goals. What do you actually want? Market returns? Business success? Career advancement? Deep relationships? Physical fitness? Financial freedom? Write them down. Be specific. Step 2. Identify the price. For each goal, ask, what is the price of admission? What will it cost you in terms of stress, uncertainty, risk, discomfort, delay, sacrifice? Be honest. Write it down. This is the ticket. Step 3. Decide. Now ask, am I willing to pay this price? Not, can I avoid it? Not, is there a cheaper way? Just, am I willing? If yes, proceed. If no, let the goal go. No shame, just honesty. Step 4. Accept the price. Once you've decided to pay, accept it. When the price comes due, when the market drops, when the business struggles, when the work gets hard, don't complain. Don't panic. Don't act surprised. You knew this was coming. You agreed to pay. Say to yourself, this is the price. I'm paying it. The returns will come. Step 5. Reframe every cost. Whenever you face a cost, ask, is this a price or a fine? If it's a price, if it's the cost of something you want, accept it. If it's a fine, if it's just punishment with no reward, avoid it. This simple question will guide you through countless decisions. The fee is mandatory. The returns are not. This is the truth. You cannot get something for nothing. You cannot have the reward without the risk. You cannot have the returns without the volatility. Everything has a price. The only question is whether you're willing to pay. The person who understands this wins. Not because they're smarter, because they're more realistic, because they accept reality instead of fighting it, because they pay the price and stay in the game. You can be that person. You can accept that nothing is free. You can decide what you're willing to pay, and you can pay it without complaint, knowing that the returns will come. Now, with this understanding, we arrive at the final chapter, the place where all these lessons come together. The summary of everything we've learned about the psychology of money. Moving to chapter 16, all together now, the summary. And if you're ready to accept the price of admission and stop treating fees as fines, hit subscribe. It's a small price to pay for decades of perspective. The fee is a click. The returns are compounded wisdom. You decide if it's worth it. I think you know the answer. Now it's the turn for chapter 16. You and me. Different games, different rules. Let me tell you about the most dangerous source of financial advice. It's not the scammers. It's not the frauds. It's not the obvious bad actors. It's something far more insidious. It's successful people playing a different game. You see someone who made a fortune in crypto. They're young, rich, confident. They tell you this is the way. You listen. You follow. You lose money. You see someone who got rich day trading. They share their strategies. They seem brilliant. You try it. You lose money. You see a retiree who swears by bonds and CDs. They're safe, secure, comfortable. You're 30 years old. You follow their advice. You miss decades of growth. None of these people are wrong. They're just playing different games. Their advice is perfect for their game. It's terrible for yours. Don't take advice from people playing a different game. This is the rule. Financial advice is never one size fits all. What works for a 25-year-old tech worker is poison for a 60-year-old retiree. What makes sense for a day trader is disaster for a long-term investor. What's rational for someone with a pension is foolish for someone without one. You have a choice. Follow the advice of successful people without understanding their context, or define your own game and filter all advice through that lens. That's the key. Let me break down why this matters so much. Every financial decision is shaped by three things. Your timeline. How long until you need this money? Your goals. What are you actually trying to achieve? Your risk tolerance. How much volatility can you stomach? These three factors define your game. Change any of them, and the optimal strategy changes completely. Let's look at examples. The 25-year-old tech worker. Timeline: 40 years until retirement. Goals: maximize long-term growth. Risk tolerance: high. They have decades to recover from losses. Their optimal strategy: aggressive. Mostly stocks. High equity allocation. They can afford to ride out crashes. The 60-year-old retiree. Timeline: they need income now. Goals: preserve capital, generate steady cash flow. Risk tolerance: low. A market crash could devastate their retirement. Their optimal strategy: conservative. Bonds, CDs, dividend stocks. They cannot afford to ride out crashes. Same advice for both? Absurd. The 25-year-old following the retiree's advice would miss decades of growth. The retiree following the 25-year-old's advice could lose everything in a downturn. Different games, different rules. Now look at trading styles. The day trader. Timeline: minutes to days. Goals: profit from short-term price movements. Risk tolerance: extremely high. They accept that many trades will lose. Their strategy: technical analysis, momentum, quick exits. The long-term investor. Timeline: decades. Goals: capture long-term market returns. Risk tolerance: moderate. They accept volatility but don't want to lose everything. Their strategy: buy and hold, diversification, ignoring short-term noise. Same advice for both? Disaster. The long-term investor day trading would get eaten alive by taxes, fees, and bad timing. The day trader trying to buy and hold would go crazy from boredom. Different games, different rules. This is why the one-size-fits-all advice you see on social media is so dangerous. Someone posts, "I made $1 million in crypto. Here's how." Thousands of people with completely different timelines, goals, and risk tolerances try to copy them. Most lose money. The poster wasn't wrong. They were just playing a different game. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can define your own game. Let me give you another example. During the 2021 meme stock frenzy, something fascinating happened. Long-term, value-oriented investors started acting like short-term speculators. They saw people getting rich on GameStop and AMC. They felt left out. They abandoned their strategies to chase the hot trade. They got burned. The stocks crashed. The short-term players moved on. The long-term investors were left holding bags. They forgot which game they were playing. They took advice from people playing a different game, and it destroyed them. This happens in every bubble. During the dot-com boom, value investors started buying tech stocks at insane valuations. During the housing bubble, conservative buyers started flipping houses. During the crypto boom, traditional investors started buying coins they didn't understand. Every time, the result is the same. They abandon their game, play someone else's, and lose. The antidote is clarity. You must know your game so well that no amount of FOMO can shake you. Define your timeline. Define your goals. Define your risk tolerance. Then filter all advice through that lens. Let's do this together. Step 1. Define your timeline. When will you need this money? Not when you hope to need it. When will you actually need it? For retirement, that might be decades away. For a house down payment, that might be a few years. For an emergency fund, that might be tomorrow. Your timeline determines your strategy. Long money can take risk. Short money cannot. Be honest about your timeline. Step 2. Define your goals. What are you actually trying to achieve? Maximum growth? Steady income? Capital preservation? Flexibility? Freedom? Status? Be specific. I want to retire at 60 with a paid-off house and enough income to travel. That's a goal. I want to get rich is not. The more specific your goal, the clearer your strategy. Step 3. Define your risk tolerance. How much volatility can you actually stomach? Not how much you think you should stomach. How much can you handle without panicking, without selling, without losing sleep? Be honest. If a 20% drop would keep you up at night, your risk tolerance is low. Accept that. Build a conservative portfolio. There's no shame in sleeping well. Step 4. Filter all advice. Now, with your game defined, you have a filter. Every time you hear financial advice, run it through your filter. Does this match my timeline? Does this serve my goals? Does this fit my risk tolerance? If the answer to any is no, ignore it. It doesn't matter how successful the person is. It doesn't matter how much money they made. They're playing a different game. Their advice is not for you. Don't take advice from people playing a different game. Say it again. Don't take advice from people playing a different game. Not because they're wrong, because they're playing a different game. Let me give you a real-world example. Warren Buffett is one of the greatest investors of all time. His advice is invaluable, but his game is unique. He has a $100 billion net worth. He runs a public company. He has access to deals you'll never see. He has a timeline that's longer than almost anyone's. His game is not your game. Learn from his principles. Don't copy his specific moves. The same is true for anyone. The 25-year-old crypto millionaire, the 60-year-old bond investor, the day trader, the real estate mogul. Learn from them all, but filter everything through your own game. You are the master of your own world. You get to define your own game. You don't need their permission to play differently. Let me tell you a story. There's an investor who did incredibly well during the 2008 crisis. He bought when everyone was panicking. He made a fortune. People asked him for advice. He said, "I was lucky. I had cash. I had a long timeline. I had a high risk tolerance. If you don't have those things, don't do what I did." He understood. His game was not their game. He refused to give one-size-fits-all advice. He respected that others were playing by different rules. This is wisdom. This is what you need. Your action protocol for playing your own game. Step 1. Write your game plan. On one page, write, what is my timeline? What are my goals? What is my risk tolerance? What is my strategy? This is your constitution. This is what you'll follow when others tempt you to stray. Step 2. Create a filter phrase. Come up with a phrase you'll use when you hear advice that doesn't fit. That works for them. It doesn't work for me. Different game, different rules. Not my timeline. Say it aloud. Let it protect you. Step 3. Study other games, but don't play them. Learn about other strategies. Understand how day traders think. Study crypto investors. Read about real estate moguls. But do it as an anthropologist, not a participant. Learn from their world. Stay in yours. Step 4. Review your game annually. Your game may change over time. As you age, your timeline shortens. As your wealth grows, your goals shift. As you experience losses, your risk tolerance may adjust. Review your game plan every year. Update it as needed. But always know what game you're playing. Don't take advice from people playing a different game. This is the rule that will save you from countless mistakes. It will keep you from chasing bubbles. It will keep you from panic selling. It will keep you in your lane, playing your game, winning on your terms. The world is full of successful people playing different games. They're not wrong. They're just not you. Respect their game. Play your own. And let the results speak for themselves. Now, with this clarity, we arrive at the final lesson. The one that ties everything together. The one that answers the question, what is money actually for? Moving to Chapter 17, Freedom, the highest dividend money pays. And if you're ready to define your own game and stop taking advice from people playing different ones, hit subscribe. It's one of those decisions that fits every timeline, every goal, every risk tolerance. A small deposit of perspective that works for anyone playing the long game. That's the beauty of it. Play your game. We'll be here. Our next Chapter 17 is all about the seduction of pessimism. Let me tell you about the most addictive drug in the world. It's not heroin. It's not cocaine. It's pessimism. Pessimism sells. Bad news gets attention. Doom scrolling is addictive. The algorithms know this. The news networks know this. Your own brain knows this. We are wired to pay attention to threats. It kept our ancestors alive on the savannah. It keeps us glued to our screens today. But there's something deeper. Pessimism is also intellectually seductive. It sounds sophisticated to predict collapse. It sounds smart to be skeptical. It sounds wise to assume the worst. The pessimist is taken seriously. The optimist is dismissed as naive. This is a trap. A dangerous, expensive trap. Because the reality is this. Progress happens slowly and quietly. Good news is boring. It doesn't make headlines. It doesn't go viral. It just happens, day after day, year after year, decade after decade. And over time, that boring progress transforms everything. You have a choice. Get sucked into the doom scroll and miss the growth. Or maintain perspective, ignore the noise, and let the quiet progress work in your favor. That's the key. Let me give you some perspective. In 1900, the average life expectancy was 32 years. Today, it's over 70. That happened slowly, quietly, through vaccines, sanitation, antibiotics. No headlines, just progress. In 1950, global poverty rates were over 70%. Today, they're under 10%. That happened slowly, quietly, through trade, technology, economic growth. No headlines, just progress. In 1980, the murder rate in the US was nearly 10 per 100,000. Today, it's about 6. That happened slowly, quietly, through better policing, economic opportunity, demographic shifts. No headlines, just progress. In 2000, a smartphone didn't exist. Today, billions of people carry supercomputers in their pockets. That happened slowly, quietly, through years of innovation and investment. No headlines, just progress. The list goes on. By almost every meaningful measure, the world is getting better. Slowly, imperfectly, unevenly, but undeniably better. You don't feel it day to day. You can't. Progress is too slow for your brain to register. But over decades, it's unmistakable. Now look at the headlines. Every day, a new crisis, a new threat, a new reason to panic. If you believe the headlines, you'd think the world is ending. It's not. It's improving. The headlines are just better at selling fear than hope. This matters for your money. Because pessimism drives bad financial decisions. When you're constantly told the world is ending, you sell. You go to cash. You hide. You miss the growth. And over time, that pessimism costs you a fortune. Consider this. Since 1900, the US stock market has survived world wars, depressions, pandemics, assassinations, riots, financial crises, and countless other disasters. Through it all, it has delivered about 10% annual returns. Not because the world is perfect, because human ingenuity keeps finding ways to improve. Optimism is a bet on human ingenuity, and history shows it pays. Say it again. Optimism is a bet on human ingenuity, and history shows it pays. Not blind optimism, not ignoring risks, but a fundamental belief that people will keep solving problems, creating value, and making life better. Let me give you a real-world example from Morgan Housel. He writes about the difference between progress and headlines. Progress is what happens between the crises. Headlines are the crises. If you focus on the headlines, you miss the progress. Think about the last 20 years. Headlines: 9/11, Iraq War, financial crisis, pandemic, inflation, political turmoil. A constant stream of bad news. Progress during those same 20 years. Life expectancy increased. Global poverty fell. Technology transformed everything. Medical breakthroughs saved millions. The stock market tripled. The headlines said one thing. Reality said another. Which one did you believe? This is the seduction of pessimism. It feels smart to focus on the bad. It feels sophisticated to worry. It feels responsible to be cautious. But if that caution causes you to miss decades of growth, it's not smart. It's expensive. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can maintain perspective. You can ignore the noise. You can stay invested while the world panics. Let me give you the framework for resisting pessimism. Step 1. Separate headlines from reality. When you see a scary headline, ask, is this a new problem, or is this the same old human drama playing out again? Most crises are just the latest version of problems we've faced forever. War, disease, economic cycles, they're not new. They're just repackaged. The world survived them before. It will survive them again. Step 2. Zoom out. Look at the long-term charts, not the daily noise. The decades. See the line that goes up through wars and crashes and pandemics. That line is reality. The daily fluctuations are just noise. Zoom out until the noise disappears. Step 3. Study history. Read about past crises. Learn how people felt during them. Read the newspapers from 2008, from 2000, from 1929. They all thought it was the end. They were all wrong. History is a graveyard of pessimistic predictions. Let that knowledge steady you. Step 4. Focus on what's getting better. Make a list. Every day, add one thing that's improved in your lifetime. Technology, medicine, communication, travel, comfort, safety, opportunity. The list will grow. It will remind you that progress is real, even when headlines are scary. Step 5. Stay invested. The single best antidote to pessimism is staying in the game. Keep investing. Keep owning assets. Keep participating in growth. The pessimists will sell. The optimists will buy. Over decades, the optimists win. Not because they're luckier, because they're still in the game when progress happens. Optimism is a bet on human ingenuity, and history shows it pays. This is not about being naive. It's about being realistic. Realism acknowledges problems, but also acknowledges solutions. Realism sees the crises, but also sees the recovery. Realism knows that every generation faces challenges, and every generation overcomes them. Think about your own life. How many times have you worried about something that never happened? How many crises did you survive? How many times did things turn out better than you expected? Your own history is evidence. Use it. Let me tell you a story. In 1979, a famous business magazine ran a cover story titled "The Death of Equities." It argued that stocks were finished. Inflation was too high. The economy was broken. Investors should give up. Anyone who believed that missed the greatest bull market in history. The 1980s and 1990s delivered massive returns. The pessimists were wrong. Again, this pattern repeats endlessly. Pessimism is always seductive. It's always convincing. And it's almost always wrong about the long term. Not because there's nothing to worry about. There's plenty. But because human ingenuity is more powerful than any single problem. We solve things. We adapt. We improve. It's what we do. You can bet against that. Many do. They miss the growth. Or you can bet with it. You can stay invested, stay optimistic, and let human ingenuity work for you. The choice is yours. Your action protocol for resisting pessimism. Step 1. Conduct a pessimism audit. Look at your news consumption. How much is negative? How much is positive? How do you feel after consuming it? If the answer is anxious and overwhelmingly negative, cut back. Your mental health is worth more than the headlines. Step 2. Create a progress log. Every week, write down one piece of evidence that the world is improving. A medical breakthrough, a technological advance, a personal win, a global statistic. Build a record of progress. Refer to it when pessimism strikes. Step 3. Study the long charts. Pull up a chart of the S&P 500 over the last 100 years. Look at it. See the line that goes up through every crisis. Print it. Put it on your wall. Let it remind you that the trend is your friend. Step 4. Make a pessimism rule. Create a rule for yourself. I will not make financial decisions based on headlines. When you feel the urge to sell because of bad news, pause. Wait 24 hours. Consult your long-term plan. Act only from strategy, never from fear. Step 5. Bet on ingenuity. Invest in human progress. Own businesses that solve problems. Own the market that represents human creativity. Stay invested. Let the optimists bet compound over decades. Optimism is a bet on human ingenuity, and history shows it pays. Say it one more time. Let it sink in. Let it guide you through the next crisis, the next panic, the next wave of pessimism. You know the truth. Progress happens. The world improves. The pessimists are loud, but they're usually wrong. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can maintain perspective. You can ignore the noise. You can stay in the game long enough for progress to work in your favor. Now, with this perspective, we arrive at the final chapter, the place where all these lessons come together. The summary of everything we've learned about the psychology of money. Moving to chapter 18, all together now, the summary. And if you're ready to resist the seduction of pessimism and bet on human ingenuity, hit subscribe. It's one of those small acts of optimism, a choice to invest in perspective rather than panic. The headlines will keep screaming. You'll keep learning. Over time, that compound interest of wisdom will pay. History shows it. It's time for the chapter 18, when you'll believe anything. Let me tell you about the most dangerous person in the world. It's not the criminal. It's not the fraudster. It's not the obvious villain. It's someone far more convincing. It's the person who speaks with absolute certainty. The one who has all the answers. The one who never doubts, never hesitates, never says, "I don't know." We are drawn to these people. They give us comfort. In a world of uncertainty, they offer clarity. In a world of complexity, they offer simplicity. In a world where no one knows what's coming, they claim to know everything. And we believe them because we want to believe. Because not knowing is uncomfortable. Because admitting ignorance feels like weakness. But here's the truth. No one can know everything. Not you. Not me. Not the experts. Not the gurus. Not the prophets. No one. We all have gaps in our knowledge. Vast, yawning gaps. And we fill those gaps with stories, assumptions, and beliefs. This is how we function. We can't operate in the world without filling in the blanks. But it's also how we get scammed. It's how we end up believing things that aren't true. It's how we make decisions based on confidence rather than evidence. The greatest enemy of good decisions is confidence in bad information. Say it again. The greatest enemy of good decisions is confidence in bad information. Not lack of information. Confidence in bad information. When you're absolutely sure about something that's wrong, you're more dangerous than someone who knows they don't know. You have a choice. Be seduced by certainty and risk being wrong. Or embrace humility, admit what you don't know, and make decisions that account for your ignorance. That's the key. Let me explain why this matters so much in finance. The financial world is full of people who sound absolutely certain. They know exactly where the market is going. They have the perfect stock pick. They've cracked the code. They speak with such confidence that you can't help but believe them. They're almost always wrong. Not because they're stupid, because no one knows. The future is unpredictable. The market is complex. Anyone who claims certainty is either lying or deluded. But confidence sells. Certainty attracts followers. The hesitant expert is ignored. The confident charlatan is celebrated. This is the paradox of expertise. Real knowledge includes humility. Real experts acknowledge uncertainty. The more someone knows, the more they're aware of what they don't know. The wisest investors I know are the ones who say, "I could be wrong," and mean it. The ones who claim to have all the answers? They're the ones to avoid. Let me give you a real-world example. In 2007, many experts were absolutely certain that housing prices would never fall nationally. They had charts. They had data. They had models. They were completely confident. Anyone who questioned them was dismissed as uninformed. We know what happened next. The housing market crashed. The experts were wrong. Their confidence was based on bad information, but they didn't know it. They believed their own certainty. In 1999, experts were absolutely certain that the internet would change everything and that tech stocks would keep rising forever. They were confident. They were wrong. The dot-com bubble burst. Trillions of dollars evaporated. The pattern repeats endlessly. Certainty precedes disaster. Humility survives. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can resist the seduction of certainty. You can embrace not knowing. Let me give you the framework for intellectual humility. Step 1. Admit what you don't know. This sounds simple. It's not. Our egos fight it. We want to seem smart. We want to have answers. We want to be certain. But the first step to wisdom is admitting ignorance. Make a list of things you don't know about finance, investing, economics, markets. The list will be long. That's okay. That's honest. That's the starting point. Step 2. Be wary of certainty. When someone speaks with absolute certainty, your skepticism should rise. Not because they're definitely wrong, because they're claiming something that's almost impossible to know. Ask yourself, how could they possibly know this? What evidence do they have? What are they missing? The more certain they sound, the more skeptical you should be. Step 3. Seek out dissenting views. If you're sure about something, find someone who disagrees. Read their arguments. Try to understand their perspective, not to be convinced. To test your own certainty. If your view can't survive contact with opposing ideas, it's not strong. It's brittle. Step 4. Make decisions that account for ignorance. Since you know you don't know everything, build that into your decisions. Diversify. Leave margin. Avoid bets that require you to be right. Assume you could be wrong and plan accordingly. This is not weakness. It's wisdom. Step 5. Stay curious. The opposite of certainty is curiosity. Instead of assuming you know, keep asking questions. Keep learning. Keep updating your views. The world changes. New information emerges. The curious mind adapts. The certain mind breaks. The greatest enemy of good decisions is confidence in bad information. This is the mantra. Let it guide you. When you feel absolutely certain, pause. Ask, what if I'm wrong? When someone speaks with absolute confidence, pause. Ask, what are they not telling me? When the crowd is sure, pause. Ask, what are we all missing? Let me tell you a story about Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner. He famously said, "I would rather have an 80% chance of $100 than a 100% chance of $70." But he also said, "I never allow myself to have an opinion on anything that I don't know the other side's argument better than they do." Munger understood humility. He knew that confidence without understanding both sides is dangerous. He studied opposing views. He looked for reasons he might be wrong. He built his success on intellectual humility, not certainty. You can do the same. Let me give you another example. Consider the difference between a weather forecaster and a stock market prognosticator. Weather forecasters are humble. They give probabilities. There's a 30% chance of rain. They update their predictions constantly. They admit when they're wrong. And they're often right enough to be useful. Stock market prognosticators are certain. The market will go up 20% this year. They rarely update. They rarely admit mistakes. And they're almost always wrong. Which one would you trust? The humble one with probabilities? Or the certain one with predictions? The answer is obvious. Yet we keep listening to the certain ones. Because certainty sells. Because we want to believe. Resist that urge. Embrace humility. Seek probabilities, not predictions. Make decisions that account for uncertainty. You'll be wrong less often. And when you are wrong, you'll survive. Your action protocol for intellectual humility. Step 1. Create an I don't know list. Write down 3 things about finance that you don't fully understand. Not to feel bad. To be honest. To know where your gaps are. Then decide whether to fill them or just acknowledge them. Step 2. Test your certainties. Pick one thing you're absolutely sure about regarding money. Now find the strongest argument against it. Read it. Really try to understand it. See if your certainty survives. If it does, great. If it doesn't, update your view. Step 3. Follow humble experts. Find investors, thinkers, and commentators who admit uncertainty, who use words like probably, maybe, I could be wrong, who update their views when new information emerges. Learn from them. Avoid the certain ones. Step 4. Build a mistake file. Keep a record of times you were absolutely sure and wrong. Review it regularly. Let it remind you that your certainty is not a reliable guide. Let it humble you before the next big decision. Step 5. Practice saying, I don't know. In conversations about money, practice admitting uncertainty. I don't know where the market is going. I'm not sure which investment is best. I could be wrong about that. It feels uncomfortable at first. It gets easier. And it's the truth. The greatest enemy of good decisions is confidence in bad information. This is the lesson. The world is full of people who are absolutely certain about things they can't possibly know. Don't be one of them. Don't follow them. Embrace humility. Admit ignorance. Make decisions that account for uncertainty. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can handle not knowing. In fact, it's the only honest position. And honesty with yourself is the foundation of all wisdom. Now, with this humility, we arrive at the final chapter, the place where all these lessons come together. The summary of everything we've learned about the psychology of money. Moving to chapter 19, all together now, the summary. And if you're ready to embrace intellectual humility and stop being seduced by false certainty, hit subscribe. It's one of those decisions that acknowledges you don't know everything, but you know enough to keep learning. The channel won't give you certainty. It will give you perspective. That's more valuable. That's the point. Chapter 19 is the complete recap. All together now, the summary. We've covered a lot of ground. 19 chapters, 19 lessons, 19 shifts in perspective, each one building on the last, creating a new way of seeing money, risk, wealth, and yourself. Now it's time to bring it all together. Not as tactics, not as tips, as a philosophy, a way of being with money that prioritizes survival, flexibility, and peace over maximum returns and status. A framework that will serve you for the rest of your life. Let's go through them, one by one. Rapid fire. Let them land. Chapter 1. No one's crazy. Everyone's financial decisions make sense given their unique life experiences. The person who lived through the Depression saves differently than the person who grew up in a boom. Neither is wrong. They just have different memories. Understand your own wiring. Stop judging others. Chapter 2. Luck and risk, the twins you can't ignore. Every outcome is shaped by forces beyond your control. A good decision can fail. A bad decision can succeed. Never confuse outcomes with strategy. Be humble about wins. Be merciful about losses. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Chapter 3. Never enough. The trap of more. Comparison is a game you will lose. There will always be someone richer, faster, luckier. Define your own finish line. Enough is not less than you want. Enough is recognizing that some things, your reputation, your family, your peace, are not worth risking for more. There is no amount of money worth sacrificing your sleep. Chapter 4. Confounding compounding. The eighth wonder. Small gains, over long periods, produce staggering results. Warren Buffett's secret isn't genius stock picks. It's starting young and living long. Compounding applies to knowledge, relationships, skills, everything. Time is the only input you can't replace. Start early. Stay consistent. Let the machine work. Chapter 5. Getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. Two different games. Getting wealthy requires risk, optimism, aggression. Staying wealthy requires paranoia, humility, survival. The greatest investors aren't the ones with the highest returns. They're the ones who never got wiped out. The goal is not to be right. The goal is to stay in the game. Chapter 6. Tails. You win. The power of asymmetry. A tiny number of events drive the vast majority of results. You can be wrong most of the time and still win big if your wins are huge and your losses are small. Place many bets. Cut losers quickly. Let winners run. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. Your action protocol for intellectual humility. Step 1. Create an I don't know list. Write down 3 things about finance that you don't fully understand. Not to feel bad. To be honest. To know where your gaps are. Then decide whether to fill them or just acknowledge them. Step 2. Test your certainties. Pick one thing you're absolutely sure about regarding money. Now find the strongest argument against it. Read it. Really try to understand it. See if your certainty survives. If it does, great. If it doesn't, update your view. Step 3. Follow humble experts. Find investors, thinkers, and commentators who admit uncertainty, who use words like probably, maybe, I could be wrong, who update their views when new information emerges. Learn from them. Avoid the certain ones. Step 4. Build a mistake file. Keep a record of times you were absolutely sure and wrong. Review it regularly. Let it remind you that your certainty is not a reliable guide. Let it humble you before the next big decision. Step 5. Practice saying, I don't know. In conversations about money, practice admitting uncertainty. I don't know where the market is going. I'm not sure which investment is best. I could be wrong about that. It feels uncomfortable at first. It gets easier. And it's the truth. The greatest enemy of good decisions is confidence in bad information. This is the lesson. The world is full of people who are absolutely certain about things they can't possibly know. Don't be one of them. Don't follow them. Embrace humility. Admit ignorance. Make decisions that account for uncertainty. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can handle not knowing. In fact, it's the only honest position. And honesty with yourself is the foundation of all wisdom. Now, with this humility, we arrive at the final chapter, the place where all these lessons come together. The summary of everything we've learned about the psychology of money. Moving to chapter 19, all together now, the summary. And if you're ready to embrace intellectual humility and stop being seduced by false certainty, hit subscribe. It's one of those decisions that acknowledges you don't know everything, but you know enough to keep learning. The channel won't give you certainty. It will give you perspective. That's more valuable. That's the point. Chapter 19 is the complete recap. All together now, the summary. We've covered a lot of ground. 19 chapters, 19 lessons, 19 shifts in perspective, each one building on the last, creating a new way of seeing money, risk, wealth, and yourself. Now it's time to bring it all together. Not as tactics, not as tips, as a philosophy, a way of being with money that prioritizes survival, flexibility, and peace over maximum returns and status. A framework that will serve you for the rest of your life. Let's go through them, one by one. Rapid fire. Let them land. Chapter 1. No one's crazy. Everyone's financial decisions make sense given their unique life experiences. The person who lived through the Depression saves differently than the person who grew up in a boom. Neither is wrong. They just have different memories. Understand your own wiring. Stop judging others. Chapter 2. Luck and risk, the twins you can't ignore. Every outcome is shaped by forces beyond your control. A good decision can fail. A bad decision can succeed. Never confuse outcomes with strategy. Be humble about wins. Be merciful about losses. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Chapter 3. Never enough. The trap of more. Comparison is a game you will lose. There will always be someone richer, faster, luckier. Define your own finish line. Enough is not less than you want. Enough is recognizing that some things, your reputation, your family, your peace, are not worth risking for more. There is no amount of money worth sacrificing your sleep. Chapter 4. Confounding Compounding, the eighth wonder. Small gains, over long periods, produce staggering results. Warren Buffett's secret isn't genius stock picks. It's starting young and living long. Compounding applies to knowledge, relationships, skills, everything. Time is the only input you can't replace. Start early. Stay consistent. Let the machine work. Chapter 5. Getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. Two different games. Getting wealthy requires risk, optimism, aggression. Staying wealthy requires paranoia, humility, survival. The greatest investors aren't the ones with the highest returns. They're the ones who never got wiped out. The goal is not to be right. The goal is to stay in the game. Chapter 6. Tails. You win. The power of asymmetry. A tiny number of events drive the vast majority of results. You can be wrong most of the time and still win big if your wins are huge and your losses are small. Place many bets. Cut losers quickly. Let winners run. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. Chapter 7. Freedom. The highest dividend money pays. The greatest thing money buys is control over your time. The ability to wake up and say, "What do I want to do today?" is priceless. Every dollar saved is a minute of freedom purchased. Money's greatest intrinsic value is its ability to give you control over your life. Chapter 8. The man in the car paradox. You see a fancy car and assume the driver is impressive, but you don't actually want the car. You want the respect you think it will bring. No one is as impressed by your possessions as you think they are. If respect is what you want, there are cheaper ways: kindness, humility, integrity. We want respect, but we buy things hoping to get it. Chapter 9. Wealth is what you don't see. Rich and wealthy are not the same. Rich is what you spend. Wealth is what you keep. The person in the modest sedan may be a millionaire. The person in the fancy car may be drowning in debt. Wealth is invisible because it's the money not spent. Wealth is the money you didn't spend, invested where you can't see it. Chapter 10. Save money for no reason at all. Not for a house. Not for retirement. Just save. Because flexibility is its own reward. Savings give you options. They let you quit a bad job, weather a crisis, take a risk. You can build wealth without a high income, but you cannot build wealth without a high savings rate. Chapter 11. Reasonable is greater than rational. The mathematically optimal plan is worthless if you can't stick with it. Better to be reasonable than rational. A paid-off mortgage may not be optimal, but if it helps you sleep, it's right for you. The best financial plan is the one you can actually follow. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the sustainable. Chapter 12. Surprise. The role of the unexpected. History is not a roadmap. The future will bring things that have never happened. Things that have never happened before happen all the time. The only certainty is uncertainty. Build margin. Expect surprises. Prepare for the unknown. Chapter 13. Room for error. The margin of safety. Plan on your plan, not going according to plan. Build a cushion. Have cash. Avoid debt. Diversify. Margin ensures you survive long enough to try again. Room for error is the only guarantee you can buy. Chapter 14. You'll change, and your plan should too. You will not be the same person in 10 years. The career you want at 25 may feel like a prison at 45. Don't let your past self trap your future self. Build flexibility. Avoid extreme, irreversible commitments. Leave room to pivot. Chapter 15. Nothing's free. The price of admission. Volatility is the price of returns. Uncertainty is the price of opportunity. These are not fines. They're entrance fees. You don't get the returns without them. The fee is mandatory. The returns are not. Decide what you're willing to pay. Chapter 16. You and me, different games, different rules. Financial advice is never one size fits all. Your timeline, goals, and risk tolerance define your game. Don't take advice from people playing a different game. Their success strategy may be your disaster. Chapter 17. The seduction of pessimism. Pessimism sells. Bad news gets attention. But progress happens slowly and quietly. The world is improving imperfectly. Don't let the noise drive you out of the game. Optimism is a bet on human ingenuity, and history shows it pays. Chapter 18. When you'll believe anything. No one knows everything. We fill gaps with stories. The more certain someone sounds, the more skeptical you should be. Real knowledge includes humility. The greatest enemy of good decisions is confidence in bad information. These are not tactics. They're not tips. They're not hacks. They're a philosophy. A way of seeing money that prioritizes survival over speculation, flexibility over optimization, peace over status. A framework that acknowledges you're human, with fears, biases, and blind spots, and builds a financial life that works despite them. The goal is not to be a genius. The goal is not to have the highest returns. The goal is not to impress anyone. The goal is to be a person who can stick with a sensible plan long enough for compounding to work its magic. That's it. That's the whole game. Show up. Save consistently. Invest sensibly. Ignore the noise. Leave margin. Be humble. Stay flexible. Keep learning. And give it time. Time is the only input you can't replace. Start now. Stay consistent. Let the machine work. You have the lessons. You have the framework. You have the philosophy. Now go live it. And if these 19 chapters have changed the way you see money, hit subscribe. Not because you need permission, because this is the kind of perspective that compounds over time. Each video is a small deposit in your mental margin account. Watch enough of them. Stay humble. Keep learning, and one day you'll realize you think differently about money than almost anyone you know. That's the magic. That's the point. Chapter 20 is about confessions, Housel's own struggles. Let me tell you something you don't hear often from financial experts. I don't follow all my own advice. Morgan Housel, the author of Everything We've Explored, admits this openly. He has a paid-off mortgage. The math says he shouldn't. Investing that money instead of paying off the house would almost certainly generate higher returns over time. The spreadsheet says invest. The optimizer says leverage. The rational mind says keep the mortgage. But Housel sleeps better with a paid-off house. So he paid it off. This is not a contradiction. It's a confession. It's permission. Permission to be human. Permission to prioritize peace over optimization. Permission to manage money in a way that fits your psychology, not just your spreadsheet. Manage your money so you can sleep at night. Nothing else matters as much. Say it again. Manage your money so you can sleep at night. Nothing else matters as much. Not the highest returns. Not the optimal allocation. Not the perfect strategy. If you can't sleep, if you're anxious, if you're constantly checking your portfolio, if every market drop sends you into a panic, you've missed the point. The money isn't serving you. You're serving the money. Housel's confession is the most important lesson in the entire book, because it acknowledges the truth that every other chapter dances around. You are human. You have emotions. You have fears. You have a life beyond the spreadsheet. You have a spouse who worries. You have kids who need you present. You have a body that needs sleep. You have a mind that needs peace. None of that shows up in the optimization models. None of that is captured by the efficient frontier. None of that is calculated by the compound interest formulas. But it's real. It's the only reality that matters. You have a choice. Chase the mathematically optimal strategy and risk losing sleep, losing peace, losing perspective. Or build a financial life that lets you rest, even if it's not perfect. That's the key. Let me give you more of Housel's confession. He admits he keeps more cash than he probably needs. The math says invest it. The optimizer says put it to work. But Housel likes the security. He likes knowing that if something goes wrong, job loss, market crash, unexpected expense, he has a cushion. He doesn't have to make desperate decisions. He can wait. He can think. He can breathe. Is it optimal? No. Is it reasonable? Yes. Does it let him sleep? Absolutely. He admits he doesn't rebalance as often as he should. He knows the theory. He knows the benefits. But he also knows himself. He knows that tinkering leads to mistakes. So he stays hands-off. He lets the machine run. It's not perfect. It's sustainable. He admits he's made bad investments. Gotten caught up in stories. Believed things that weren't true. He's human. Just like you. Just like me. This is the gift of the confession. It's not a weakness. It's a release. It's permission to stop chasing perfection and start building peace. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can handle the truth. The truth is, there is no single right way. There is only your way. The way that lets you sleep. The way you can sustain. The way that aligns with who you are, not who you think you should be, not who the experts say you should be, not who the spreadsheet demands you be. Your way might include a paid-off mortgage, even if the math says invest. Your way might include more cash than necessary, even if inflation eats at it. Your way might include simple index funds, even if you could theoretically optimize with factor tilts. Your way might include working longer than you need to, because you love what you do. Your way might include retiring earlier than you can afford, because life is short. Your way might include giving money away, even before you've made it. Your way might include spending on things that bring you joy, even if they're not efficient. There is no single right way. There is only your way. Let me give you a real-world example. Two people, both readers of this book, both intelligent, both financially savvy. Person A has a high-risk tolerance. They're young, single, with a stable job. They invest aggressively. 100% stocks. They sleep fine during crashes. They're playing their game. Person B has a low-risk tolerance. They're older, with a family, with responsibilities. They invest conservatively. 50% stocks, 50% bonds. They sleep fine during crashes. They're playing their game. Who's right? Both. They're playing different games. They have different psychologies. Their money serves them differently. Neither should copy the other. This is the ultimate lesson. The psychology of money is personal. It's not one size fits all. It's not a formula. It's a relationship. Your relationship with money is unique. Honor it. Manage your money so you can sleep at night. Nothing else matters as much. This is the mantra. This is the test. Every financial decision should pass it. Considering a new investment? Ask, will this help me sleep or keep me up? Thinking about taking on more debt? Ask, will this help me sleep or keep me up? Planning to leave a job? Ask, will this help me sleep or keep me up? Saving more or spending more? Ask, will this help me sleep or keep me up? The answer won't always be obvious. Sometimes the thing that helps you sleep long-term requires short-term discomfort. That's okay. The question is still the right one. The answer will guide you. Let me tell you a story. There's a famous investor who was asked about his biggest mistake. He said, "I didn't sell enough when I had the chance. I was too greedy. I wanted the perfect exit. I ended up with a good exit instead of a great one. But you know what? I still slept fine. And I learned something." He understood. Perfection is the enemy of peace. Good enough is good enough. Sleep matters more. You are the master of your own financial world. Not the spreadsheet's world. Not the expert's world. Not the guru's world. Your world. Your peace. Your sleep. So here's your permission. Official. Written. Unconditional. Permission to be human. Permission to make decisions that aren't mathematically optimal, but are psychologically right for you. Permission to prioritize peace over performance. Permission to hold more cash than you should. Permission to pay off your mortgage even if the math says invest. Permission to work longer than you need to because you love it. Permission to retire earlier than you can afford because life is precious. Permission to give money away before you've made your fortune. Permission to spend on things that bring you joy, even if they're not efficient. Permission to change your mind as you change. Permission to admit you don't know. Permission to be wrong and survive. Permission to sleep at night. This is not a license for foolishness. It's not an excuse to avoid hard decisions. It's not a reason to ignore good advice. It's a recognition that the ultimate goal of money is not to maximize returns. It's to maximize life. And life includes sleep, peace, joy, connection, freedom, purpose. Money is just a tool. The tool serves the life, not the other way around. Manage your money so you can sleep at night. Nothing else matters as much. Say it one last time. Let it sink into your bones. Let it guide every financial decision you make from this day forward. Manage your money so you can sleep at night. Nothing else matters as much. Not the returns. Not the status. Not the comparison. Not the optimization. Sleep. Because when you're lying in bed at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, anxious about money, none of the returns matter. None of the optimization matters. None of the should-haves matter. Only the peace you don't have. Build the peace. Protect the peace. Prioritize the peace. Everything else is just noise. Your final action, the one that ties everything together. Step 1. Conduct a sleep audit. Ask yourself honestly, do I sleep well at night? If yes, you're probably on the right track. If no, something needs to change. Identify what's keeping you up. Is it risk? Debt? Spending? Comparison? Uncertainty? Name it. Then address it. Step 2. Give yourself permission. Write it down. I have permission to manage money in a way that lets me sleep. Read it aloud. Let it sink in. You don't need anyone's approval to prioritize your peace. Step 3. Build your sleep-first plan. Go back through the chapters. Pick the lessons that resonate. Build a plan that fits your psychology, not someone else's. Yours. Simple. Sustainable. Sleepable. Step 4. Test your plan. Live with it for a month. Check in with yourself. Are you sleeping better? Are you less anxious? If yes, keep going. If no, adjust. The plan serves you. You don't serve the plan. Step 5. Remember the confession. When doubt creeps in, when you wonder if you're doing it right, remember Morgan Housel. Remember the paid-off mortgage. Remember the extra cash. Remember the human behind the book. You're in good company. Manage your money so you can sleep at night. Nothing else matters as much. This is the end of the book, but it's the beginning of your relationship with money. A relationship built not on fear, not on greed, not on comparison, but on peace, on sleep, on life. You have the lessons. You have the permission. You have the path. Now go live it. And sleep well. And if this final chapter gave you permission to prioritize peace over perfection, hit subscribe. Not because you need another expert telling you what to do, because this channel is a reminder, every week, that the goal is not maximum returns. The goal is maximum life. Sleep well. We'll be here when you need perspective. Thanks for staying until the conclusion. We've traveled through 20 chapters, 20 lenses on the strange, beautiful, irrational relationship between humans and money. And if you take nothing else, take this. Your financial success will not be determined by your IQ. It will be determined by your behavior, by your ability to control greed when others are euphoric, by your courage to stay calm when others are panicking, by your wisdom to define enough before the market defines it for you. The math of money is easy. A child can learn compound interest. But the psychology of money? That takes a lifetime. Be patient. Be humble. Leave room for error. Save for no reason. Value your freedom above your status. And remember, the point of money is not to have the most toys. The point of money is to wake up every morning in control of your own life. The richest person is not the one with the most. It's the one who needs the least to be happy. Now go. Apply these lessons not to your portfolio, but to your life. That's where the real wealth lies.